Chapter 860. I owe a chapter yesterday. No need to explain. I'll make up for it. Sectmaster Peak, Wind Pavilion. After listening to Qin 13's recount of Emperor Qin's request for his opinion on a candidate to take over the Northern Army, Yu Haoran thought for a moment, then took out a blank jade slip from his storage ring. He recorded his preferred candidate and the reasons for his recommendation in detail. 13. Deliver this jade slip to His Majesty. Yu Haoran instructed after tossing the jade slip to Qin 13. After receiving the jade slip and using the bell in his hand to teleport to the Imperial Palace in Xianyang, Qin 13 waited with Yu Haoran for a while. 1 minute later, as the bell in his hand began to ring, Qin 13 took out an imperial edict from it and respectfully presented it to Yu Haoran. Emperor's son-in-law, His Majesty, has written down the candidate to take over the Northern Army. Taking the imperial edict from Qin 13, Yu Haoran opened it and glanced at it. A gratified smile immediately appeared on his face. Then, he put away the imperial edict in his hand and waved at Lan Rong and the others in the square. 13, let's go. When Lan Rong's group of 6 arrived at the pavilion, Yu Haoran gestured to Qin 13 and took to the air, heading straight for the entrance of the Four Symbols sect. Following closely behind Yu Haoran, Han Guangbei approached Qin 13 and asked in a low voice, "My lord, who are you? Don't ask about my background if you don't want to die." Qin 13 warned in a voice brimming with murderous intent as he turned to look coldly at Han Guangbei. His cold gaze made Han Guangbei feel as if his soul had been plunged into an ice cellar. He couldn't help but shudder. Then he took a few steps back in horror, distancing himself from Qin 13. "General Han, His Majesty is right. Try not to pry too much into things you shouldn't know." The indifference in Qin 13's eyes when he warned Han Guangbei told Lan Rong that the man's background must be quite astonishing. Lan Rong kindly reminded Han Guangbei, out of consideration for the fact that they were both under the Emperor's son-in-law. "I know." Nodding, Han Guangbei said with lingering fear, "Ji Qingyu, do you know your crime?" When they arrived at the entrance of the Four Symbols sect, not only did Ji Qingyun not bring his direct descendants to guard the sect, but he had instead ordered his subordinates to bring over a table and a chair. Afterwards, he placed a few types of spiritual fruits on the table. He was currently drinking happily and humming a little tune. He seemed to be at ease. Before Ji Qingyu could say anything, Qin 13, who had suddenly sped up to Ji Qingyu, demanded harshly. Ji Qingyu picked up an 8th grade, 9th rank purple cloud fruit and tossed it into his mouth. After chewing and swallowing, he looked up at Qin 13 and asked in a disdainful tone, "Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to question this general?" How? Ji Qingyu's arrogant Ji Qingyu was to provoke 13's for him to be for his to speak for His Majesty's. At the same time, an aura arose from 13's body. It was a powerful aura that could shake the heavens and earth. Although Yu Haoran knew that Qin 13 was very strong as a peak 9th level martial saint, perhaps possessing the strength of a quasi-martial exalt who had achieved perfection in the realm of laws, it was only when he truly displayed his aura that Yu Haoran discovered that he was even stronger than he had imagined. The Law of Edge. I didn't expect this person to be able to comprehend such an obscure law. Faling, who'd also been awakened by Qin 13's powerful aura, carefully sensed the law power contained in the aura and exclaimed in surprise. Faling, the Law of Edge. Compared to the Law of Slaughter, which one is superior? When Faling pointed out the type of law Qin 13 had comprehended, Yu Haoran suddenly recalled the handsome Azura he'd created with the Law of Slaughter back in Xianyang City when he faced Wang Xian of the Wang family. Yu Haoran, the Law of Edge definitely can't compare to the Law of Slaughter. That's because the Law of Slaughter is a superposition of the Law of Slaughter and the Law of Slaughter. The Law of Edge, on the other hand, is only a single law. Faling explained in detail to Yu Haoran's questions. However, if this kid can comprehend the law of benefit or the law of light and superposition them, his strength will probably surpass that of the Wang family's ancestor. I see. After listening to Faling's explanation, Yu Haoran understood the reason for Qin 13's strength. He was also filled with boundless expectations for the law power he'd comprehend in the future. He attached even more importance to it. After all, superposition of laws also varied in strength. So powerful, Han Guangbei, who'd been a little unconvinced at first, exclaimed in admiration after sensing the terrifying aura rising from Qin 13's body. Yeah, Lan Rong nodded in agreement. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He'd finally remembered Qin 13's origins. Of course, it wasn't Qin 13's true origins, but his identity as a soldier of the Northern Army. When he recalled the order he'd given Qin 13 as a patrolman to patrol the barracks, Lan Rong couldn't help but smile wryly. He was also a little worried that Qin 13 might hold a grudge against him. How dare you? Do you know who I am? Ji Qingyu roared angrily after being forced to sit on the ground by Qin 13's powerful aura. Aren't you just an ordinary general of the Northern Army? Qin 13 continued to exert pressure with his aura while replying disdainfully. That's right, I'm just an ordinary general, but I come from the Ji family of Xianyang City. My sister is the emperor's favorite concubine and has been conferred the title of empress. Since he couldn't resist Qin 13's powerful aura, Ji Qingyu gave up and crawled on the ground to threaten him. Offending me is the same as offending Her Majesty. Offending Her Majesty is the same as offending the emperor. You're dead, kid. Ji Qingyu, I forgot to tell you that the emperor has just revoked the edict conferring your sister consort Ji. Faced with Ji Qingyu's threat, Qin 13 suddenly retracted his powerful aura and spoke in a mocking tone. You're lying. Ji Qingyu shot to his feet and retorted loudly. I received a message from my family yesterday. The imperial edict conferring my sister the empress has already been sealed with the imperial jade seal. No one but His Majesty can change the imperial decree. Is that so? Qin 13 retorted with a sneer. He took out an imperial edict from his storage ring and waved it at Ji Qingyu. Ji Qingyu, do you know what this is? Chapter 861. In front of the Four Symbols sect, an imperial edict. As Ji Qingyu answered, he sensed that something wasn't quite right. The fact that this expert in ordinary soldier's garb could obtain an imperial edict meant that he was somehow connected to the emperor. Considering the strength he'd just displayed and Emperor Qin's control over the military, a frightening thought came to mind. Ji Qingyu, kneel and receive the edict. Qin 13 saw the change in Ji Qingyu's expression clearly. It wasn't until Qin 13 took out the imperial edict that Qin 13 guessed his true identity. How could someone with such a slow reaction and an arrogant personality act so domineeringly? If Ji Qingyu continued to stay in the army, he'd be a disaster. Qin 13 wholeheartedly approved of Yu Haoran's decision to make an example out of Ji Qingyu. Ji Qingyu received the edict. Having guessed Qin 13's identity, Ji Qingyu didn't dare continue his arrogance and hurriedly knelt to receive the edict. This subject, Ji Qingyu receives the edict. There was no need for Qin 13 to read the edict aloud. A golden character slowly appeared on the edict he'd just opened. After leaving the edict, the character slowly floated into the air. Then, the character began to twist and distort, finally condensing into a sacred sword exuding intense murderous intent. Unpardonable, execute. A dignified voice boomed when the sacred sword was fully formed. Immediately after, the sacred sword quickly appeared above Ji Qingyu's head. Just as he was about to open his mouth to beg for mercy, the sacred sword directly cut off his head and destroyed his soul. Generally, have someone collect Ji Qingyu's body and send it back to the Ji clan in Xianyang City. After killing Ji Qingyu with the sacred sword, Yu Haoran couldn't help but sigh. He then turned his head and ordered Li Quanqing behind him. Understood. Li Quanqing acknowledged with a sigh. Although he and Ji Qingyu weren't exactly on good terms, and they'd often quarreled over petty gains, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw the enemy he'd quarreled with for decades suddenly killed. Bei Guang, summon the other 5 generals. I have an important announcement to make. When Li Quanqing arranged for his subordinates to collect Ji Qingyu's corpse, Yu Haoran instructed Han Guangbei. Yes, Han Guangbei responded and immediately informed Wu Fenghua and the others through divine thought. When Wu Fenghua and the others arrived at the Four Symbols sect and saw the corpses being carried away, a sliver of worry appeared in their eyes. Looking up at the 11 generals in front of the Four Symbols sect, Yu Haoran took a deep breath, took out the imperial edict Qin 13 had sent him via the bell, and slowly unfolded it. When they saw Yu Haoran take out the imperial edict, Qin 13, Lan Rong, and the other soldiers all knelt down on one knee or both and respectfully shouted, "Long live the Emperor!" Although he knew that the imperial edict in Yu Haoran's hand listed the candidate who would take over the position of Great General, Qin 13 didn't know who the candidate would be. He looked at Yu Haoran expectantly. Lan Rong and the others, who didn't know the contents of the imperial edict at all, looked puzzled. Looking up at the puzzled Lan Rong, Yu Haoran gestured with a smile. Lan Rong, receive the imperial edict. Lan Rong, who hadn't been mentally prepared, was stunned for a moment. But at Han Guangbei's reminder, Lan Rong hurriedly got up, took 3 steps forward, and knelt down to receive the edict. This subject, Lan Rong, receives the imperial edict. By the will of the heavens, His Majesty decrees. Tiger General Lan Rong, loyal, brave, and resourceful. He is conferred the title of Great General Zhichong and will command 100,000 soldiers on the northern front. Lan Rong raised his head to look at Yu Haoran. His eyes were slightly red as he thanked Yu Haoran. This subject thanks Your Majesty for your grace. General Lan, I hope you can lead 100,000 elite soldiers on the northern front to the border between the two realms and fulfill His Majesty's initial wish of unifying the southern region. When Yu Haoran handed the imperial edict to Lan Rong, he also gave him his blessings. Holy son-in-law, words cannot express my gratitude for your great kindness. In the future, everything will depend on this subordinate's actions. Although Lan Rong didn't say anything about swearing loyalty, his resolute expression expressed his true gratitude to Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran reached out and patted Lan Rong on the shoulder. He took the opportunity to pass a storage ring to Lan Rong and reminded him with his divine thought. General Lan, before I destroyed the treasury of the Four Symbols sect, I had already stored all the treasures in the treasury into this storage ring. His Majesty has helped me settle the matter with the Ministry of War, the Ministry of Appointments, and the Ministry of Rights, so you can boldly accept it without worry. I've divided the treasures in the storage ring into 7 portions. Apart from General Qi Weixian, who received 2 portions, each of you will receive 1. After reminding Lan Rong, Yu Haoran nodded at Qin 13 and soared into the sky, leaving the Four Symbols sect without a trace of hesitation. Qin 13 glanced at Lan Rong, then also took to the air to catch up to Yu Haoran. Generals, please follow me to the Great Hall on the main peak of the Four Symbols sect. When he saw Yu Haoran leave the Four Symbols sect without saying goodbye, Lan Rong knew that this was an opportunity for him to take over the army on the northern front. Therefore, Lan Rong, who was holding the imperial edict in his hand, ordered with a strong sense of authority. After flying away from the Four Symbols sect, Yu Haoran turned back to the army camp. Then he began to chase after the 7-tailed white fox that had abducted General Guyu based on the lingering presence in the camp. Qin 13 didn't question Yu Haoran's strange behavior. Instead, he followed closely, hoping to lock onto the 7-tailed Arctic fox as soon as possible. Perhaps the 7-tailed white fox thought too highly of herself, or perhaps she was delayed by some matters. But Yu Haoran managed to catch up to the 7-tailed white fox's exact location after chasing for less than 3,000 miles based on the lingering smell in the air. Rumble! Yu Haoran frowned and reminded Qin 13 when he saw the majestic waterfall that seemed like the Milky Way descending from the 9 heavens. 13. The 7-tailed Arctic fox's presence has disappeared due to the waterfall in front of us. Holy son-in-law, do you have any other methods of pursuit? Qin 13 asked anxiously. Don't worry. Yu Haoran turned his head to indicate for Qin 13 to calm down and continued his explanation. Although the 7-tailed Arctic fox's presence has disappeared, I've analyzed the residual scent at the scene. She should have arrived at the waterfall half an hour ago. Therefore, you'll need to use your powerful consciousness to search a radius of several hundred kilometers and see if you can find any trace of the seven-tailed Arctic fox. Holy son-in-law, please wait a moment. Chapter 862. In front of the waterfall. Thowling, given that seven-tailed white fox's cunning and cautious personality, I'm worried that 13 won't be able to accurately track her down. I'll have to trouble you to use your consciousness to help me track her down. While Chin 13 was using his consciousness to track the seven-tailed white fox, Yuhauran hurriedly asked for help from the Thowling in his sea of consciousness. All right, the Thowling responded with a simple word, then immediately released the consciousness of a peak 9th-rank martial sovereign and began scanning for any movement within a radius of 500 li. 5 minutes later, Chin 13 withdrew his consciousness and shook his head in disappointment. Just as he was about to say something, the Thowling in his sea of consciousness suddenly reminded him, Yuhauran, go straight into the waterfall. 13, come with me. Without asking about the situation behind the Thowling waterfall, Yuhauran hurriedly reminded Chin 13. Then, mustering all the energy in his body, he charged straight into the torrential waterfall in front of him. Without the slightest hesitation, Chin 13 not only chased after him, but also used his powerful strength to block the torrential waterfall for him, allowing him to easily pass through the waterfall and appear in the cave behind it. How is this possible? As soon as he steadied himself, Yuhauran was stunned by the black iron rod embedded in a cyan rock in front of him. This was because the black iron rod embedded in the cyan rock was the Like My Intentions rod that had chosen to leave him in the spirit mist created by the high-grade rank 5 spirit vein in the Blue Moon Hidden Realm. What's wrong, son-in-law? Chin 13 asked in confusion when he saw Yuhauran's expression change abruptly at the sight of an ordinary iron rod in front of him. Nothing. Taking a deep breath, Yuhauran casually replied, then strode up to the black iron rod and asked in a complicated tone, Like My Intentions rod. As I wish. How'd you been? If he hadn't brought it out from the law enforcement peak's vault and used the ape's blood essence to stimulate its dormant consciousness, it would probably still be an ordinary iron rod without any consciousness. However, it was precisely because he had awakened a trace of its instincts from its dormant consciousness that he had obtained the combat consciousness of the Monkey Clan's demon emperor in the near-ancient times. Thus, he had grasped the sky-facing staff strike that could unleash the power of a quasi-martial venerable. That was why his feelings were so complicated when he faced the What I Thought rod. In the face of Yuhauran's interrogation, the As I Wish rod, which was like an ordinary iron rod, shook slightly, and then a golden light shot directly into his sea of consciousness. After spending a period of time together, Yuhauran knew that If You Like Me would not hurt him for the time being. Therefore, in the face of the rapidly approaching golden light, he did not dodge and allowed the golden light to enter his sea of consciousness. The golden light that fused into the sea of consciousness immediately turned into a majestic golden-armored ape wearing golden armor, a golden crown on its head, a golden staff in its hand, and cloud shoes on its feet. Overturning rivers and seas, the golden-armored ape roared. Together with the golden staff in its hand, it instantly split into hundreds and thousands of golden-armored apes. Then, they launched an identical attack at several points in the void of his sea of consciousness. As the golden light fused into his sea of consciousness, it was closely connected to his soul. Therefore, every step of the golden-armored ape's staff technique and every process of the demonic power circulation were deeply imprinted in his mind. After the golden-armored ape finished the overturning rivers and sea staff technique, Yuhauran took the opportunity to master this powerful staff technique that was not inferior to the sky-facing staff strike. As I Wish rod, it seems like you have made your final choice. After the golden-armored ape finished performing the overturning rivers and sea staff technique, it turned back into a golden light. After it had completely fused into his consciousness, Yuhauran opened his eyes. Looking at the staff that was still in the shape of an ordinary iron staff, Yuhauran already knew its choice. He also understood that the staff technique it had just bestowed upon him was to completely sever all ties between them. Therefore, even though he'd accepted the overturning rivers and sea staff technique that wasn't inferior to the sky-facing staff strike, Howard didn't show any gratitude. In that case, you and I will be strangers from now on. After reminding Qin 13, he used a movement technique and dashed into the depths of the cave. 13. The seven-tailed Arctic fox is at the end of the cave. Qin 13 turned to look at the staff, a trace of confusion flashing through his eyes. However, he didn't pursue the matter and immediately sped up to catch up to Howard. The cave passage behind the waterfall was very deep. It only took nearly 10 minutes for Howard to reach the end of the cave. As soon as he steadied himself, a rich spirit energy mixed with the aroma of spirit fruits assailed his nostrils. Howard, your opportunity has come. Thowling reminded him with a smile, just as Howard was trying to identify the specific type of spirit fruit through the aroma mixed with the spirit energy. Thowling, do you know the origin of the spirit fruit at the end of the cave? Howard asked in pleasant surprise. When the primordial world was first created, the chaos gave birth to 3 unique spirit trees. Thowling didn't immediately answer Howard's question. Instead, it explained with a yearning expression. The first is a unique wind and thunder spirit tree. The wind and thunder spirit tree blossoms once every million years, bears fruit once every million years, and ripens once every million years. One is the wind fruit, and the other is the thunder fruit. It allows one to break through to the martial god realm and become a primordial great god without any restrictions. Sizzle. Although the growth cycle of the wind and thunder spirit tree was too long, a wind fruit or a thunder fruit could allow one to see through the mystery of life and death and attain the martial god realm of immortality. Such a heaven-defying effect made Howard gasp as he couldn't help but ask, Thowling, do you know the whereabouts of the wind and thunder spirit tree? If he could obtain the wind and thunder fruits, then he would be able to fly together with Qin Lingfei and never be separated. I do. What made Howard even more surprised was that Thowling actually knew the whereabouts of the wind and thunder spirit tree. Thowling, where is it? His voice trembled as he asked. In a dream, Thowling replied teasingly. Thowling, don't joke around. Howard complained with some dissatisfaction. Howard, think about it. With the current environment, it is extremely difficult to break through to the martial honorable realm. How could the rules of heaven allow such a heaven-defying existence like the wind and thunder spirit tree to exist? Sensing the dissatisfaction in Howard's tone, Thowling stopped joking and told him the truth. When the primordial world was destroyed, the wind and thunder spirit tree was completely destroyed. Sigh. Hearing that the wind and thunder spirit tree had been destroyed, Howard couldn't help but sigh. Then, he remembered that Thowling had mentioned that there were 3 unique spirit trees, and continued to ask, Thowling, what are the other 2 spiritual roots? Chapter 863. Behind the waterfall, at the end of the cave, the second type of spiritual tree is also a unique ginseng fruit tree. It blooms once every 100,000 years, bears fruit once every 100,000 years, and ripens once every 100,000 years. When the fruits ripen, there will be 36 of them. It ignores all restrictions. One ginseng fruit can allow one to break through to Emperor Wu's realm and enjoy a long lifespan. Thowling continued to explain. Thowling, there's no need to ask. The ginseng fruit tree must have been destroyed, right? With the strong impact of the wind and thunder spiritual tree, Howard was not only calm in the face of the ginseng fruit tree that could only help one break through to Emperor Wu's realm, but he was also in the mood to tease Thowling. That's right. It was destroyed at the same time as the wind and thunder spiritual tree. Nodding his head, Thowling confirmed and continued to explain the origin of the third type of spiritual tree. The third type of spiritual tree is called the peaches of immortality. There are 3 of them, and each of them bears 12 peaches. It blooms once every 10,000 years, bears fruit once every 10,000 years and ripens once every 10,000 years. When the fruits ripen, there will be 36 of them. It also ignores all restrictions. One Peaches of Immortality can allow one to break through to Martial Honorable's realm and enjoy a long lifespan of 5,000 years. Fouling, there's no need to ask. The Peaches of Immortality were destroyed in ancient times, just like the wind and thunder spiritual tree and the ginseng fruit tree, Yu Haoran said calmly. Yes and no. However, Fouling gave a different answer this time. Fouling, what do you mean? Yu Haoran quickly asked. Since the Peaches of Immortality are not unique, it has the possibility of being transplanted and revived. In ancient times, human martial artists were at their peak. There was a female powerhouse whose cultivation and strength were comparable to the ancient divine beast king. This powerhouse obtained a Peaches of Immortality's core by accident. Then, she used the source of life to cultivate it and finally succeeded in reviving the Peaches of Immortality. At this point, Fouling's tone could not help but reveal a hint of admiration as he continued to narrate. Although the revived Peaches of Immortality's peaches do not have the heaven-defying effect of helping one break through to Martial Honorable's realm in ancient times, they still have the effect of helping one's cultivation. There are a total of 365 peach trees that were resurrected by that ancient expert. 100 years to bloom, 100 years to bear fruit, and 100 years to ripen. There are 4,380 ripe fruits. It also ignores all restrictions. A single Peach of Immortality can directly increase one's cultivation by 100 years. Fouling glanced at Yu Haoran through his knowledge sea and used him as an example. Yu Haoran, your current cultivation is at early 3rd grade Martial King, and your physical body is at early 6th grade Martial King. If I consume a Peach of Immortality, my cultivation will instantly reach the peak of 7th grade Martial King, and my physical body will also reach the peak of 9th grade Martial King. At this point, Fouling's spiritual sense looked towards the end of the cave, where the spirit chi had completely vaporized. His voice was filled with excitement. Moreover, using the Peaches of Immortality to increase your strength doesn't have any side effects. You just need some time to consolidate your strength. Fouling, could the fruity fragrance at the end of the cave have something to do with the Peach of Immortality? After more than a year of contact, Yu Haoran understood Fouling's personality very well. He knew that he wouldn't mention the 3 ancient spirit trees for no reason. Since he emphasized the Peach of Immortality, there must be a deeper meaning behind it. Thus, Yu Haoran couldn't help but speculate. That's right. There just so happens to be a ripe Peach of Immortality left behind from ancient times at the end of the cave. Moreover, the 7-tailed white fox is also under the tree, Fouling confirmed with a smile. 13. I've already found the 7-tailed white fox. After receiving confirmation from Fouling, Yu Haoran suppressed his joy and turned to Qin 13. Holy son-in-law, there's no need for you to do it yourself. Leave the 7-tailed white fox to me. The spear in his hand trembled slightly. The ordinary spear that looked like it was made of black iron immediately gave off the aura of a Saint Realm weapon. All right, nodding in agreement, Yu Haoran strode across the end of the cave and entered the extremely spacious space at the end. Although the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was so dense that it had completely vaporized, it didn't affect Yu Haoran and Qin 13, who were martial kings and martial saints respectively. According to Fouling's reminder, they'd only been in the space for 10 minutes when Yu Haoran saw a peach tree that wasn't very tall, but its branches and leaves were filled with boundless mysteries. Yu Haoran's attention was drawn to bowl-sized peaches hanging from its branches. On the other hand, Qin 13's attention was drawn to the small white fox with 7 giant tails standing under the tree. White fox, your time of death has come. In Qin 13's opinion, the 7-tailed Arctic fox had to be the culprit who'd abducted Great General Gu Yu just by following the lingering presence of the camp all the way to the cave behind the waterfall 2,000 kilometers away. Because its attention had been drawn to the peaches on the tree, it hadn't noticed Yu Haoran and Sheen 13 entering the space at the end of the cave. The seven-tailed Arctic fox jumped in fright when Sheen 13's shout rang out. But when it turned around and saw that Sheen 13 was wearing Emperor Sheen's military uniform, it immediately understood why he was after it. "It looks like you want to avenge Guyu." The fox didn't panic in the slightest in the face of Sheen 13's swift charge. Instead, it grinned as it swung its 7 giant tails. "Damned white fox, you really are General Guyu's murderer." Sheen 13 immediately sped up his attacks when he heard the fox admit that it had abducted Guyu. Grinning at Sheen 13, the fox's 7 giant tails swung faster and faster. Immediately after, countless pink smoke spurted out from the 7 swaying tails, instantly filling the surroundings. 13, be careful. This is the secret technique the fox used to seduce General Guyu. Yu Haoran warned Sheen 13 loudly as he motioned for the tower genie to set up a defensive barrier with his consciousness when he saw the 7-tailed Arctic fox's pink smoke. "Holy son-in-law, this subordinate is fine. Just take care of yourself." Sheen 13's unusually calm voice sounded from within the pink smoke just as Thaling finished setting up the barrier. Thaling comforted him at the same time. "Don't worry, Yu Haoran. Although the 7-tailed Arctic fox's pink smoke can bewitch the vast majority of men in this world, there is still a small number of men who can resist the temptation. Sheen 13, who's comprehended the law of edge, is one of them." As soon as Thaling finished speaking, the 7-tailed Arctic fox's pained cries rang out from within the pink smoke. Chapter 864. In the space at the end of the cave. When Yu Haoran saw that Sheen 13's spear had pierced the 7-tailed white fox's chest, he realized that it was only heavily injured and not truly dead. Things weren't looking good for it. He immediately flashed to Sheen 13's side and warned him in a seemingly friendly manner. 13, the 7-tailed Arctic fox, is sinister and cunning. It has many tricks up its sleeve. To prevent any accidents, you'd better destroy its soul. In truth, he was worried that a living 7-tailed Arctic fox might expose the secret of the soul-severing banner and cause unnecessary trouble. "Thank you, holy son-in-law." Sheen 13 immediately nodded and shook his spear, extinguishing the 7-tailed Arctic fox's life, force, and soul. Even with his superior mental state and special training in the art of seduction, he had almost fallen into the 7-tailed Arctic fox's trap. Yu Haoran was stunned when he saw Sheen 13 obediently listen to his suggestion and kill the 7-tailed Arctic fox without hesitation. Yu Haoran, although Sheen 13 isn't affected by the pink smoke, it doesn't mean he isn't affected. Fortunately, the pagoda spirit in his sea of consciousness explained in time. At this moment, he's both affected by his own instincts and the 7-tailed Arctic fox. If you don't believe me, you can ask him directly if he's interested in the immortality peach. Yu Haoran was very tempted by Thaling's suggestion, but when he saw Sheen 13 take out a small and exquisite bell from his sleeve and contact Sheen Yi, he suppressed the urge to ask for the time being. After receiving Sheen Yi's instructions through the bell, Sheen 13 cupped his fists and took his leave. "Holy son-in-law, since the culprit who abducted Great General Guyu has been killed, this subordinate must return to Xianyang City immediately." 13, do you know what this is? Yu Haoran asked nervously as he pointed at the bowl-sized immortality peach in front of him. This subordinate doesn't know and doesn't want to know. Sheen 13 immediately replied, without looking closely at the peach hanging on the branch. "In that case, you should return to Xianyang City as soon as possible." Sheen 13's response confirmed Thaling's explanation. Yu Haoran inwardly sighed in relief and motioned for Sheen 13 to leave. A peach tree could bear 12 peaches of immortality. Even if he was given 1 or 2 peaches of immortality, Yu Haoran would not have any objections. However, according to Thaling, the peach tree at the end of the cave was very likely to be related to the demon monarch of the monkey clan in the near ancient times, as well as the expert who could revive the peach tree. Even though the demon emperor of the monkey race and that powerful being had long turned into ashes, They had left behind some means that could still affect the current state of things. It was just like the Monkey Emperor's life-bound Emperor artifact, as I wish. Therefore, the fewer people who knew about this kind of secret, the better. Given Qin 13's special identity, there was no way he could keep the immortality peach tree a secret. Left with no other choice, Yu Haoran used the seven-tailed fox's secret art to send Qin 13 out of the waterfall cave. Thowling had also used a special art to make Qin 13 forget all about the immortality peach tree. Since the seven-tailed fox's soul had been destroyed, it could be considered a dead object that could be stored in a storage space. Therefore, Qin 13 put the fox's corpse into his storage ring, then turned and left the cave and the waterfall. After Qin 13 left, Yu Haoran walked to the foot of the immortality peach tree. Looking at one of the dangling peaches, Yu Haoran was overjoyed. He stood on tiptoe, intending to pluck one for a taste. However, as soon as his fingers touched the peach, a numbing sensation that numbed even his soul caused him to stumble back several meters. Thowling, why didn't you warn me beforehand? Yu Haoran grumbled in exasperation as he circulated his soul force and elemental energy to eliminate the numbing sensation. This is to teach you a lesson. You need to think twice before you do anything. In the face of Yu Haoran's exasperated complaints, the tower spirit first warned him before solemnly reminding him. Yu Haoran, the seven-tailed fox, entered this space half an hour before we did. Why hasn't it plucked any immortality peaches in such a long time? Haven't you thought about it carefully? Thowling, I'm sorry. I'll be more careful in the future. After hearing the Tower Genie's reminder, Yu Haoran knew that he had made a mistake and quickly apologized to the Tower Genie. Yu Haoran, as a pill master with profound cultivation, you should know that the more precious a spirit herb is, the more likely it is for a spirit beast to appear to protect it. As an immortal tree that can directly raise one's cultivation, how can an immortal peach tree not have some means to protect itself? Thowling, what's the origin of the energy that made my soul feel numb? Yu Haoran hurriedly asked. That's a layer of defensive energy formed when the immortality peach tree absorbed the power of lightning in the world as it grew. It's equivalent to a guardian spirit beast protecting it. What about its power? There were strong and weak lightning powers. Yu Haoran needed to determine the strength of the lightning to decide whether he should pluck the immortality peaches himself or let Thowling do it. Yu Haoran, even the rank 4 seven-tailed fox couldn't pluck the immortality peaches. What do you think about its power? Thowling couldn't help but sneer when he saw that Yu Haoran still hadn't discovered anything special about the immortality peach tree through the various actions of the seven-tailed fox. After hearing Thowling sneer, Yu Haoran knew that his state of mind had been completely messed up by the immortality peaches. Therefore, he took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. Then, he signaled to Thowling. Thowling, do it. Thowling nodded satisfactorily when he saw that Yu Haoran had finally realized his problem. Then, he left Yu Haoran's mind and appeared in front of the immortality peach tree. Thowling quickly made a seal with his 10 fingers and used the circular seal to trap the immortality peaches. Then, one by one, the immortality peaches were sucked into the victor by Thowling. Yu Haoran, the power of lightning on the immortality peaches will dissipate in about 3 days. At that time, use 2 or 3 immortality peaches and see if you can raise your cultivation and physical body to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm. In this way, it'll be easier for you to enter the mystery realm and take risks, Thowling suggested after sucking the 12 immortality peaches into the victor. Okay, I'll listen to you. Yu Haoran nodded and agreed with Thowling's suggestion. Then, he looked at the withering immortality peach tree. Yu Haoran, don't worry. After 100 years, the immortality peach tree will grow new shoots and then start a new cycle of growth, blooming, bearing fruit, and withering. Seeing that Yu Haoran was looking at the withering immortality peach tree, Thowling thought that Yu Haoran was worried about the immortality peach tree and quickly comforted him. Chapter 865. In the space at the end of the cave, Through the boundless knowledge sea, Thowling discovered that in Yu Howren's eyes, a sprout of the peach of immortality appeared. Thowling was ecstatic. Then, he immediately summoned Yu Howren's second doppelganger in the victor and asked him to go to the entrance at the end of the cave and set up a defensive and confusing formation to prevent anyone from accidentally breaking in. After the second doppelganger left, Thowling immediately used his divine thought to gather the spiritual chi in the entire space so that Yu Howren could use it at any time. As the peach of immortality in Yu Howren's eyes began to grow 2 leaves, a suction force gradually formed from his body. At first, the suction force was very weak, and it did not increase his strength at all. However, as the leaves from the peach of immortality in his eyes grew bigger and bigger, and as the number of leaves increased, the strength of the suction force began to increase. As the suction force absorbed more and more gaseous spiritual chi, his cultivation and physical body, which had long been consolidated, began to slowly improve. When the peach of immortality in his eyes grew into a small sapling, Yu Howren's body emitted 2 auras of a breakthrough. As the auras rose, his cultivation broke through to the middle stage of the 3rd grade Martial King, and his physical body advanced to the middle stage of the 6th grade Martial King. As the sapling of the peach of immortality continued to grow, the strength of the suction force became stronger and stronger. His cultivation and physical body advanced continuously, and soon he reached the peak of the 3rd grade and the 6th grade. When the sapling of the peach of immortality in Yu Howren's eyes grew into a mature spiritual tree, the strength of the suction force increased by more than 10 times. His cultivation successfully broke through to the early stage of the 4th grade Martial King, and his physical body advanced to the early stage of the 7th grade Martial King. Alas, the image of the immortality peach tree appeared in Yu Howren's mind. From the beginning it had sprouted, to the end it had grown into a mature spirit tree. And yet, it had only helped Yu Howren's cultivation base and fleshly body to break through by 1 minor level. If Yu Howren's cultivation had been at the martial royal realm, he could have entered the state of enlightenment in advance. And with the help of the peach of immortality, he could have broken through to the martial sage realm. But now it's a pity. Yu Howren, who had entered the state of enlightenment in advance, did not hear Thowling's sigh and muttering just now. At this moment, he was attracted by the peach of immortality's consciousness, which caused his cultivation and physical body advanced rapidly. His divine soul continued to grow and strengthen. The rapid growth and strengthening of the divine soul was even more effective in enhancing the effects of epiphany. It wasn't long before the first bud of the immortality peach tree appeared in his eyes. When the peach of immortality bore its first bud, the suction force on his body suddenly increased by more than 10 times. The suction force instantly increased by dozens of times. Together with the dense gaseous spiritual energy in the air, Xiao Chen's cultivation and physical body, which had just broken through, skyrocketed. By the time his cultivation had reached the peak of the 4th grade of the Earth Martial King, and his physical body had reached the peak of the 7th grade, the large amount of gaseous spiritual chi that the Tower Spirit had used its divine sense to draw and could no longer satisfy the needs of his cultivation and physical body to break through to a higher realm. Faced with this situation, the Tower Spirit did not hesitate in the slightest. It directly took out a large amount of 5th rank, 1st to 9th rank spirit stones from the Territory Tower. Then, it used its divine sense to shatter the spirit stones and assist Yu Howren's cultivation in breaking through to the early 5th rank Martial King. At the same time, he mobilized a large amount of pure astral power stored in the victor and used it to help Yu Howren's physical body advance to the 8th grade Martial King. However, as the peach of immortality in Yu Howren's eyes began to bear buds, his cultivation and physical body advanced rapidly. As a result, Thowling could only shatter the spiritual stones and mobilize the pure astral power in the victor. Boom! 10 minutes. In just 10 minutes, The peach of immortality in Yu Haoran's eyes bore its 12th bud, and all 12 buds bloomed at the same time. His cultivation, which had just reached the early stage of the 5th grade Martial King, broke through to the early stage of the 6th grade Martial King, and quickly reached the peak of the 6th grade Martial King. When his physical body advanced to the early stage of the 9th grade Martial King, it quickly reached the peak of the 9th grade Martial King. Fortunately, his physical body had reached the peak of the 9th grade Martial King. It would be difficult for him to break through in a short time. Therefore, Fowling turned off the Victor for the time being and stopped the input of astral power. He focused on improving his cultivation. In the following period of time, as the blooming buds formed small peaches of immortality, the peaches of immortality grew little by little. When they grew into ripe peaches of immortality the size of bowls, Yu Haoran's cultivation finally stopped at the peak of the 8th grade Martial King. At this moment, Fowling, who no longer needed to use the spiritual stones to provide spiritual qi, looked at Yu Haoran nervously. He saw the peach of immortality and the 12 peaches of immortality in his eyes. Since no one was picking them, the 12 ripe peaches of immortality began to fall off the branches one by one. They quickly fell to the ground and instantly turned into a large amount of pure spiritual qi and disappeared from sight. When the 12 ripe peaches of immortality had all fallen off the branches, Fowling, who was nervous, could not help but clench his fists and murmur softly, Continue to have an epiphany. Continue to comprehend the withering and rebirth of the peach of immortality. Complete the reincarnation between life and death. Unfortunately, when the leaves of the peach of immortality had just started to turn yellow, Yu Haoran slowly closed his eyes. Fowling shook his head and sighed in disappointment. Fowling, don't be disappointed. Actually, with my own accumulation, being able to comprehend the law of life at the Martial King realm is already a heaven-defying opportunity. Closing his eyes meant the end of the epiphany. Yu Haoran, whose consciousness had left the state of emptiness, happened to hear Fowling's sigh just now. He did not need to think too much to know why Fowling had sighed. Therefore, he comforted Fowling as he used the rich spiritual qi in the space to consolidate his cultivation and physical body grade that he had just broken through. If I deliberately pursue the law of death, which overlaps with the law of life, it will destroy my state of mind and affect my comprehension of the law of life. Yu Haoran, I understand what you said just now. I'm just a little unwilling to accept it. Fowling said regretfully in the face of Yu Haoran's comforting words. After all, the combined might of the law of life and the law of death will not only rank in the top 10 among the tens of thousands of laws, but the combined power of the laws can also form a domain that separates life and death. It's definitely the strongest method to challenge those of a higher level. Fowling, if it weren't for the epiphany, I would only be a 3rd grade Martial King now. Yu Haoran remained calm in the face of Fowling's unwilling explanation and continued to comfort him contentedly. As a 3rd grade Martial King, being able to comprehend the power of the laws that only martial sages can comprehend is already extremely heaven-defying. I'm already very satisfied that I was able to succeed in the end. Furthermore, my current cultivation is still low, and I still have a long way to go. I have enough confidence that I will definitely be able to comprehend the law of death in the future and then overlap it with the law of life to form the true law of life and death. At this point, Yu Haoran's consciousness merged with his soul, and he bowed deeply to Fowling. Fowling, thank you. Chapter 866. In the space at the end of the cave. Fowling, if you hadn't been willing to consume the power of your soul to perform the possession technique, allowing me to sense the endless vitality contained in the law of time in advance, I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the withering of the peach tree to enter a state of epiphany. Even if I was lucky enough to enter a state of epiphany, without the understanding and accumulation of the endless vitality, it would be absolutely impossible for me to comprehend the law of life. At this point, Yu Haoran bowed again and continued to express his gratitude in a very sincere tone. Fowling, Thank you. Thowling waved his hand and motioned for Yu Haoran to stop being so polite. He then looked directly at his soul and asked in a tone full of anticipation. Yu Haoran, just now you said that you were confident that you would comprehend the law of death in the future. Did you also feel the aura of death and withering when you used the law of time in the law of time? That's right. Nodding, Yu Haoran recalled with some lingering fear. Thowling, compared to the feeling of endless vitality that can fill all things with vitality, the aura of death and withering is too terrifying. I think that before my cultivation reaches the peak of the 9th level of the martial emperor realm, before my soul has advanced to the advanced level, before I have the confidence and courage to overcome the threat of the aura of death and withering, I will definitely not easily comprehend the law of death. Thowling could clearly feel the fear that came from the bottom of Yu Haoran's heart in his tone. The words that were already at the tip of his tongue were forcibly swallowed back down by Thowling. Without experiencing the extreme fear of facing death, how could one comprehend the true essence of the law of death? But as Yu Haoran had just explained, before everything was ready, it was definitely a risky move to try the threat of death and withering on one's life. The slightest carelessness could create a psychological shadow of absolute fear in his heart and cause him to miss the opportunity to comprehend the law of death. Thinking of this, Thowling not only swept away his disappointment, but also felt deeply gratified by Yu Haoran's restraint in the face of the law of time's temptation. Yu Haoran, the breakthrough in your cultivation and the advancement of your physical body's grade has allowed you to advance a total of 48 small realms. The tower spirit immediately shifted its attention to the cultivation realm that Zhang Xian had just broken through, so it quickly reminded Zhang Xian. Although breaking through using the state of enlightenment won't harm your own potential, it will inevitably cause the foundation to fluctuate. Therefore, you should use the rich spirit qi in this space to consolidate your cultivation as soon as possible. And, nodding his head, Yu Haoran's consciousness returned to his physical body. Then, he closed his eyes and began to consolidate his realm after his breakthrough. Xianyang, the Imperial Palace Lord, Qin Xin Xin 13 Qinish Qin, he waved his hand, indicating for Qin 13 to withdraw for the time being, and carefully guessed. Qin Yi, you are this emperor's most trusted confidant and also this emperor's right-hand man. So if there's anything you want to say, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. Hearing the caution in Qin Yi's suspicious tone, Emperor Qin knew what his concerns were. Although he had his own suspicions, he still wanted to hear Qin Yi's opinion and see if it was the same as his. Lord, this subordinate suspects that the prince consort tampered with 13's memory. After receiving Emperor Qin's heartfelt promise, Qin Yi finally voiced his inner conjecture. Reason, seeing that Qin Yi's guess was the same as his, Emperor Qin immediately asked, this subordinate suspects that the seven-tailed Arctic fox might know about the secret between the Four Symbols sect and the Green Hill Fox clan. Moreover, this secret is very likely to involve the prince consort himself. Therefore, the prince consort tampered with 13's memory and had him kill the seven-tailed Arctic fox directly to prevent the secret from being leaked. At this point, Qin Yi suddenly frowned. Qin Yi, just say what you think. Emperor Qin nodded in agreement with Qin Yi's conjecture just now, but he was very dissatisfied with Qin Yi's frown and silent action. Your Majesty, the 18 people of the Dark Dragon team were personally groomed by you, so you must know their situation very well. Not only does 13 have outstanding potential, but his state of mind is also tenacious, and his comprehension of the law of edge is about to reach perfection. Even if I did it personally, I wouldn't be able to tamper with his memory. Then, how did the prince consort tamper with a small part of his memory when he was awake? After hearing the reason for Qin Yi's frown, Emperor Qin smiled and asked, Qin Yi, if it was anyone else, they definitely wouldn't be able to do it, but for the prince consort, there seems to be nothing in this world that he can't do. At this point, Emperor Qin couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This emperor suspects that under certain circumstances, he can tamper with my memory. Also, This emperor believes that, if he is forced into a corner, he can defeat or even kill this emperor. Your Majesty, isn't this too exaggerated? Hearing Emperor Qin's praise for the prince consort, Qin Yi's eyes widened, an incredulous look on his face. Qin Yi, no matter what the prince consort's intention is, don't continue to ask about it, and don't let Qin Yi know about it, understand? Emperor Qin didn't hesitate to lower his own reputation to raise Yu Haoran's deterrence. He wanted the proud and arrogant Qin Yi to have some misgivings, so that he wouldn't secretly investigate Yu Haoran because of doubts in his heart. If he angered Yu Haoran because of this and caused a rift between them, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. After all, after surviving the third layer of calamity, he needed to consider how to smoothly advance to the martial sovereign realm. This required him to gather more national providence, as well as let his physical body, divine soul, and state of mind withstand the power of law. All of this required Yu Haoran's full support. This subordinate understands. After nodding to indicate that he understood, Qin Yi bowed and left the study. Getting up and leaving the dragon throne, Emperor Qin walked to the window sill of the study and looked to the north, muttering to himself. Haoran, what kind of secret does the seven-tailed white fox know that you didn't hesitate to tamper with Qin XIII's memory in order to hide it from this emperor? His cultivation broke through from the early 3rd grade martial king to the peak of the 8th grade martial king, and his physical body rose from the early 6th grade martial king to the peak of the 9th grade martial king. Since his rebirth, this was Yu Haoran's most consecutive breakthroughs. Although the more breakthroughs, the stronger the increase in strength, the longer it took to consolidate the realm. It took him nearly 3 days and 3 nights before he finally managed to consolidate his cultivation base and physical body after his successive breakthroughs. The consolidation of the realm was only to allow the power after the breakthrough to adapt to his sea of consciousness and Dantian. His sea of consciousness and Dantian hadn't really adapted to the power after the breakthrough. Chapter 867. Looking at the rock communicator beast lying in a pool of blood, Yu Haoran let out a long sigh of relief. Yu Haoran, after these few days of continuous fighting with exotic beasts, you can now be considered to have grasped the strength of your breakthrough. Looking at Yu Haoran adjusting the churning blood in his body through breathing, Thowling reminded him like a dutiful master. But the path of cultivation is about balancing tension and relaxation. What you need to do next is not to continue fighting with exotic beasts, but to completely relax and let your tense mind and body relax completely. The reason for doing this is not only to better adapt to the strength of your breakthrough, but also to improve your mental state cultivation. Thowling, I understand. Thank you. Yu Haoran nodded and thanked him as he put away the purple rod in his hand and tried his best to disperse the murderous aura he had accumulated during the fight. Yu Haoran, there's a beautiful lake about 300 miles ahead. Why don't you get a small boat and cruise the lake while enjoying the scenery? Thowling suggested with a smile. Good idea. After nodding and praising him, Yu Haoran directly shot up into the sky. However, he didn't immediately rush to the lake in front of him. Instead, he turned his head and looked behind him with a hint of worry in his eyes. I'm thinking of that black bear. Seeing the worry in Yu Haoran's eyes, Thowling thought for a moment and knew what he was worried about. Back in Weishan City, the black bear took the risk to use the ancient ancestral martial technique in its bloodline, causing its soul power, demonic power, and bloodline to be instantly depleted. It had no choice but to sleep to recover. Later on, after awakening with the help of a large number of top-notch pills, it obtained the opportunity to break through both its grade and bloodline. In order not to affect Yu Haoran's takeover of the Northern Army and not delay him from breaking the Four Symbols concentration formation, the Black Bear chose to leave alone and look for a suitable place to break through. It had been almost half a month since they parted ways. Under normal circumstances, it should have broken through long ago, but it hadn't appeared until now. It was no wonder that Yu Haoran was so worried. Yeah, seeing that Thowling had guessed his thoughts, Yu Haoran nodded without concealing anything. When we separated, He Xiong said that he would need at most 10 days to achieve a breakthrough in grade and bloodline. But now, although Yu Haoran didn't continue, Thowling knew what he wanted to say next, so he smiled and comforted him. Yu Haoran, don't worry. After awakening the battle consciousness of the ancient divine beast bloodline, the black bear's overall strength has increased far beyond your imagination. Even if it isn't a match for a 9th grade martial saint, I'm afraid it won't be able to escape. According to my speculation, the black bear should be greedy for a breakthrough in grade and wants to use the ancestor's battle consciousness to improve its bloodline to try to break through to a higher grade. I hope so. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran shook his head and sighed. Then he turned around and went straight to the lake that Thowling had mentioned. Less than half an hour after Yu Haoran left, a black shadow like lightning appeared in front of the rapid boulder beast that he had just killed. However, the way that the black shadow landed was very awkward, and it was obvious that it had been severely injured. Looking at the rapid boulder beast lying in a pool of blood, the black shadow carefully sniffed the remaining smell in the air and said to himself anxiously, "Oh no, Master left half an hour ago. I don't know if I can find Master in the shortest time possible." After muttering to himself, the black shadow looked up at the direction that it had just passed, and a trace of panic immediately appeared in his huge eyes. "Fight!" Forcibly suppressing the panic in his eyes, the black shadow gnashed his teeth and said to himself. Then, a black gas instantly shrouded the black shadow. Then, it disappeared from the scene at a speed more than 10 times faster than lightning. Less than 30 seconds after the black shadow disappeared, 7 experts wearing the same clothes and emitting a powerful aura appeared where the black shadow had just been, which was in front of the rapid boulder beast's corpse. That black bear just used a secret technique to leave, quickly chase after it. One of the middle-aged men, who was about 40 years old, had a dignified appearance and was a mid-9th level martial saint. Through the remaining aura at the scene, he quickly determined the method and time that the black shadow had used to leave. Calling out to the 6 people beside him, the middle-aged man took the lead and flew into the air, going straight in the direction that the black shadow had escaped. The scenery was beautiful, the lake water was clear, and there were no powerful beasts around. The lake that Thowling had just pointed out had become a tourist destination. Looking at the men and women in front of him, who were either renting boats to swim on the lake, or lying on the grass by the lake, or running into the dense forest not far away, Yu Haoran couldn't help but bitterly smile and complain. "Thowling, this is the place that you recommended to relax." Huh. Facing Yu Haoran's complaint, Thowling felt embarrassed and laughed dryly. After all, when he used his divine sense to check the surroundings, he only felt that the environment here was good, and there was no one that could threaten Yu Haoran. So he took the initiative to recommend this place. Who would have thought that this place was actually a holy place for romance, or even a secret meeting place for that kind of thing? Forget it. Since I'm here, I'll just take it as it comes. As the artifact spirit of Victor, Thowling was more concerned about safety and basically didn't pay too much attention to human feelings. Therefore, after Yu Haoran complained, he chose to stay and relax. After all, putting aside those young men and women who were dating, the environment of this lake was indeed good, and it was very suitable for relaxing. He used a first-grade 10th level spirit stone to rent a 2-person boat. As Yu Haoran used his yuan qi to drive the boat, he secretly cursed the immorality of the merchant in his heart. If a first-grade 10th level spirit stone was exchanged for silver, it would be worth about 50,000 taels of silver. If he rented a boat normally, it would be worth less than 1 silver tael at most. Although he wasn't lacking in spirit stones now, he was still rather dissatisfied with the merchant's forceful methods. Using his yuan qi to drive the boat to the center of the lake, Yu Haoran allowed the boat to stop on the surface of the lake. He leaned against the boat and took out the 25 kilograms of 100 blossom powder he found in the star tomb. He savored the fine wine while completely relaxing and admiring the scenery. The 100 blossom powder, brewed by a professional winemaker in ancient times, not only did it contain a special energy that could raise one's strength, The fragrance of the wine was mellow and fragrant. Chapter 868. In the lake. It smells so good. The mellow and fragrant smell of wine quickly attracted the attention of a beautiful woman with a hot body. That's right, it seems to be the 100 flowers fragrance specially made by the heavenly earth. But the wine smell is mellow and fragrant. It should be the best of the 100 flowers fragrance. I have never tasted it before. A young man in embroidered clothes sat opposite the beautiful woman. He inhaled the wine fragrance in the air and pointed out the source of the fragrance with experience. "Brother Hua, do you want me to taste it?" The beautiful woman looked at the young man in embroidered clothes expectantly and said coquettishly. Her coquettish voice made the young man in embroidered clothes feel a fire of lust in his lower abdomen. He quickly nodded and agreed. "Yuding, wait here. I will go and buy some from that person." Then the young man in embroidered clothes rose into the air and flew directly to Yu Haoran's boat. "If you dare to step onto my boat, I'll break your legs." Yu Haoran didn't even turn his head as he threatened the young man in embroidered robes. "My friend, I come from the Huang family in Guangling City. I am the third son of the family leader." Yu Haoran's cold threat made the young man in embroidered clothes stop immediately. But when he thought of his noble background and the 3 martial emperor guards by the lake, he immediately threatened arrogantly. "Get lost." Originally, he was tasting the wine and looking at the scenery. He had gradually relaxed his mind and body, which had been in a tense state, gradually relaxed. But the young man in embroidered clothes' interruption and threat immediately aroused the violence in his heart. He could not help but turn his head and scold him with a murderous look. This was the after effect of a rapid increase in cultivation level. It was also the important reason why Thowling suggested that he come to relax. "You dare to insult me." He asked him to get lost. After hearing Yu Haoran's scolding, the young man in embroidered clothes, who had never been humiliated like this, pointed at Yu Haoran with a red face and roared. "I will count to 3. If you don't leave, don't blame me for feeding you to the fish in the lake." Yu Haoran continued to threaten the young man in embroidered clothes coldly. "Man!" Yu Haoran's second threat completely infuriated the brocade-clothed youth. He hurriedly shouted at the lakeside. Then, 3 martial royal realm experts appeared beside the young man like a gust of wind. "Third young master, what's wrong?" A silver-haired old man, who was about 60 years old and had reached the peak of the 7th grade martial royal realm, asked the young man in brocade clothes as he looked at Yu Haoran sharply. "Uncle Cho, capture him for me. I want him to know the consequences of offending me. I want him to know what it means to live a life worse than death." Pointing at Yu Haoran, who was lying on the small boat, the young man in embroidered clothes roared at the top of his lungs. "Yu Haoran, I've realized that you're really a jinx. No matter where you go, there's no peace. Just lying on a boat, drinking a little wine, and enjoying the beautiful scenery by the lake under such circumstances could lead to a fatal disaster." Thowling was also quite depressed and speechless about this. "Bah!" Hearing the nickname Thowling gave him, Yu Haoran immediately retorted in a bad mood. "Thowling, you're the jinx. In my previous life, although Yu Haoran, often caused trouble, I've never been so easily troubled by others like in this life. The reason must be you. It must be the bad luck on your body that spread to me, causing me to often suffer from undeserved disasters. All right, don't complain to me. It's better to hurry up and activate the blood essence of the large power King Kong ape in your acupoints and get rid of these troublemakers in front of you." The tower spirit could not help but roll its eyes at Yu Haoran's slander. Originally, it wanted to argue with Yu Haoran to see who was the real jinx. However, when it saw the silver-haired old man at the peak of the 7th grade martial emperor slowly walking toward it, it quickly reminded Yu Haoran. "Old man, if you immediately turn around and leave with that brat, I might be merciful this time and not pursue the matter of disturbing my wine tasting." Standing up, he put away the 100 flowers fragrance wine and looked at the old man who was slowly walking towards him. Yu Haoran said with a cold smile, "What if I don't leave?" The old man asked with a sneer. "Then you'll be like that brat, and become food for the fish in the lake. Taking out the purple rod, Yuhaoran threatened with killing intent. Haha. After hearing Yuhaoran's threat, the silver-haired old man seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world and could not help but laugh out loud. When the laughter ended, the silver-haired old man immediately mobilized his soul force and origin energy, condensing a huge palm, and then fiercely grabbed at Yuhaoran, activating the blood essence of the large power King Kong ape in his acupoints. Yuhaoran wanted to transform and break the giant palm, and then kill the silver-haired old man and the youth in embroidered clothes. However, he unexpectedly discovered a black shadow, rushing over with a speed more than 10 times faster than lightning. Bam! The rapidly approaching black shadow directly shattered the giant palm that the old man had condensed using soul force and origin energy, and then fiercely smashed towards the small boat that Yuhaoran was on. Black Bear, looking at the black shadow that was quickly smashing towards him, the familiar aura allowed Yuhaoran to quickly know the origin of the black shadow. However, he was unable to control his charging speed, so he knew that Black Bear was definitely in trouble. He quickly transformed and caught the black bear that was smashing towards him in time. Then, he steadily landed on the small boat. Black Bear, what's wrong? Looking at Black Bear, whose entire body was covered in blood and whose aura had fallen to the 6th step of the King Realm, Yuhaoran asked with a face as cold as frost. Master, there are 7 experts from the Yuan sect who want to extract the ancestral blood essence in my bloodline. After seeing Yuhaoran, Heixiong's tense mind suddenly relaxed. Before he fainted, Heixiong quickly explained the situation. It turned out that after they parted, Black Bear had successfully found a cave with abundant spiritual energy that was suitable for him to break through his grade and bloodline. With the help of the top-notch medicinal pills that Yuhaoran had given him before he left, and with the help of the ancestral battle consciousness in his bloodline, not only did he break through his grade and successfully reach the peak of the 4th step of the Sage Realm, but he also succeeded in increasing the purity of his ancestral bloodline to 15%. However, just as Thowling had guessed, after seeing that his ancestral bloodline had been increased to 15%, Black Bear wanted to use his ancestral bloodline to try and break through to the 6th step of the 4th step of the Sage Realm. Although he finally succeeded in breaking through to the 6th step of the 4th step of the Sage Realm, the aura that was formed when he broke through just happened to alarm the 8 martial saints from the Yuan sect. One of them was an expert who was good at studying the blood essence of strange beasts and used it to increase his cultivation and strength. After discovering the special bloodline in Black Bear's body, he was immediately pleasantly surprised and wanted to extract all of Black Bear's blood essence. Faced with such a situation, how could Black Bear not resist? Unfortunately, even the weakest of the 8 martial saints of the Yuan sect was at the peak of the 7th grade martial saint realm. Chapter 869. Sorry, the 2nd and 3rd chapters of today's update are wrong. I will contact the editor tomorrow morning to correct it. In the lake, looking at the unconscious Black Bear, an uncontrollable, strong, murderous aura rose to the sky. The murderous aura was so strong that it was almost tangible. Yuhaoran's face vaguely appeared. The materialization of the murderous aura required not only a strong murderous aura, but also extremely high talent. Looking up at the strong murderous aura that was about to materialize, and then looking at Yuhaoran who was standing on the boat, the silver-haired old man, who was about to reform the giant palm and continue to attack, suddenly changed his expression. He immediately gave up the idea of continuing to capture Yuhaoran. The silver-haired old man turned around and returned to the side of the young man in embroidered clothes. He did not allow the young man to object and quickly flew to the lake with him. The silver-haired old man even chose to ignore the cries of the beautiful woman. Uncle Cho, what's wrong with you? The young man in embroidered clothes who was forcibly brought to the lake asked with a rather dissatisfied expression. Third young master, that young man is not someone you can provoke. Ignoring the young man's complaints, the silver-haired old man looked at Yu Haoran with a dignified expression and warned him with a tone of lingering fear. If you don't want to bring disaster to the family, just stand here and watch. If that young man is safe in the end, even if you kneel down and kowtow, you still have to ask for his forgiveness. Otherwise, I will personally chop off our heads in order to resolve the young man's resentment towards the family. After hearing the silver-haired old man's serious warning, the young man in embroidered clothes looked at Yu Haoran with eyes full of doubts. This was because he really could not understand what was so terrifying about this young man who was not even older than him. Uncle Cho, whose cultivation was at the peak of the 7th grade martial emperor, was so afraid of him. He even did not hesitate to commit suicide to ask for the young man's forgiveness. Ignoring the silver-haired old man who left with the young man in embroidered clothes, Yu Haoran raised his head and looked in the direction where the black bear had escaped. The murderous aura that constantly surged in his heart made his eyes gradually redden. Yu Haoran used the possession technique. The pagoda spirit reminded Yu Haoran with a murderous look. Ever since He Xiong chose to follow Yu Haoran, he could be said to be hard-working and diligent. He was even more loyal and devoted to Yu Haoran, risking his life several times to protect his master. Just like Yu Haoran, in Thaling's heart, the black bear was no longer just a pet beast. It was more like a partner, a friend, and a brother that could live and die with him. Now, not only did someone heavily injure the black bear, they even wanted to extract the ancestral blood essence within its body. Wasn't this equivalent to directly taking its life? Therefore, Thaling could not wait to kill the martial saints of the Yuan sect who were about to arrive. Okay, Yu Haoran nodded in agreement with Thaling's proposal. After all, the black bear had mentioned before it fainted that other than the peak 7th grade martial saint that it had killed with its death roar, there were 4 8th grade martial saints and 3 9th grade martial saints among the remaining 7 experts. Moreover, the person with the highest cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th grade martial saint realm. Therefore, in order to successfully kill the other party, he could only temporarily use the possession technique and then use the power of the law of time scars. Moreover, he also wanted to know the real purpose of the Yuan sect, one of the top sects, to send 8 high-level martial saints to the southern region. After all, the Yuan sect was not in the southern region, but in the central region. Just as the pagoda spirit used the possession technique, 7 powerhouses with terrifying auras appeared in the air above the lake like lightning. The 7 terrifying auras combined together not only directly shattered the clouds above the void, but also broke the countless boats on the lake. As the entire lake was shrouded by the terrifying auras, the men and women on the boats could not fly in the air in the face of the broken boats. They could only fall into the lake and slowly swim to the lakeside by means of rowing. The young beauties who were soaked in the lake successfully swam to the lakeside and successfully came ashore. Their wet clothes added to their endless charm. Unfortunately, no one at the scene noticed the increase in their charm, because everyone's eyes were all fixed on the 7 martial saints floating in the air. Boy, hand over the black bear on your boat. The terrifying aura successfully locked down the entire lake. After confirming that the unconscious black bear could not continue to escape, one of the 7 martial sages from the Yuan sect, whose cultivation had reached the middle 9th level of the martial sage realm, ordered in an unusually domineering manner. "It was you who hurt my black bear." Yu Haoran looked coldly at the other party and questioned in a tone without a trace of emotion. It was as if the other party was dead in his eyes. "Your black bear." After hearing Yu Haoran's question, the middle 9th grade martial saint was first stunned. Then, he could not help but refute with a sneer. "What a joke. This black bear has never signed any contract. How can it be your beast pet? Who said that I have to sign a contract to determine whether it is my beast pet?" While questioning the other party with a sneer, Yu Haoran rose into the air and slowly flew towards the other party. "Boy, who are you?" Yu Haoran's overly calm reaction made the expert with the highest cultivation among the 7 frown. He tried his best to maintain a calm tone and asked, "Yu Haoran of the Southern Domain's second-rate sect, the 100 Chi Gate. Yu Haoran looked at the expert who had just questioned him and replied coldly. In that case, why don't you obediently hand over the black bear? He was just a disciple of a second-rate sect. Any one of them could destroy the 100 Chi gate. Therefore, the martial saint who had ordered him to hand over the black bear immediately ordered with a firm tone. As for the peak 9th grade martial saint who had just questioned him, he looked at Yu Haoran with disdain and did not say anything else. You have been talking from the beginning to the end. The other party's firm order made Yu Haoran's gaze return to the other party. The sneer on his face returned to normal. Yu Haoran said calmly, "Furthermore, you were able to discover that I have never signed any contract with the black bear. This means that you know a lot about strange beasts. Then, you are the one who wants to extract the divine beast blood essence from the black bear's bloodline. That's right. That's me." The other party admitted with a sneer. "Then congratulations to you for being able to survive until the end." Slowly raising his arm, Yu Haoran appeared in front of the other party and said with a smile, "Scars of time." Then, he pointed his finger at an upper 8th grade martial saint expert. A wave of energy that seemed to have passed through the barrier of time and space shot directly at the upper 8th grade martial saint expert. Chapter 870. 8888, go, 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 go. In the lake. Using the power of the law of time, Yu Haoran analyzed the opponent's life experience. He immediately checked the opponent's real purpose of entering the southern mountain range. But he found nothing, because the opponent had been following the strongest expert and did not know the real purpose of entering the southern mountain range. He looked at the peak 9th level martial saint who had asked him about his origin, but after knowing that he was only from the second-rate sect, the 100 Chi gate, he looked at him with disdain. Seeing Yu Haoran's gaze directed towards him, the peak 9th grade martial saint was instantly shocked. He instinctively wanted to turn around and flee. After all, the law of time that Yu Haoran had just used was too terrifying. But he had forgotten. In order to prevent the black bear from escaping, the aura of the 7 people was united. Although this could increase the power of the aura by several times and prevent the black bear from using the secret method to escape, it also trapped them in the aura and made it difficult for them to escape. Quickly remove the united aura. Realizing that he was trapped in the united aura, the peak 9th level martial saint hurriedly reminded his companions. Time scars. But at this moment, a cold voice like that of the Grim Reaper sounded. The peak 9th level martial saint found that his body and divine soul were instantly split into countless pieces by a strange force. How is this possible? Yu Haoran shouted in disbelief when he saw the sect master of the Yuan sect giving the peak 9th level martial saint the task. That's impossible. The pagoda's spirit in the sea of consciousness was equally shocked. Then, Faling, who was the first to wake up from the shock, reminded Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran, immediately kill all the people of the Yuan sect and make sure that the secret will not be leaked. Okay. After being reminded by Faling, Yu Haoran, who had barely recovered from the shock, immediately pointed at the remaining 5 martial saints of the Yuan sect. Time scars. Time scars. Whether it was Yu Haoran or Faling, using the power of the law of time 5 times in a row was a huge consumption. If it weren't for the fact that Yu Haoran had comprehended the law of life in advance and was able to greatly reduce the consumption of his spiritual energy when using the law of time scars, he would have died a long time ago. Otherwise, Faling, who had consumed too much of his spiritual energy, would have ended the possession immediately. Through analyzing the life experiences of the 5 martial saints, Yu Haoran discovered that the martial saint expert, who was extremely familiar and knowledgeable about exotic beasts, also knew the true purpose of entering the southern region. Faling, what should we do next? Yu Haoran asked, unable to suppress the excitement in his heart, after taking the 7 martial saint experts' storage artifacts. Yu Haoran, don't ask, don't interfere. After thinking for a while, Faling gave a suggestion that Yu Haoran could not accept. Why? Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. Because we are neither qualified nor capable to compete for this divine beast cub. Faling said with a wry smile. Faling, If we are not qualified and capable to compete for it, then why did you ask me to kill everyone in the Yuan sect just now? Yu Haoran continued to ask, puzzled. Because I was distracted at that time. I only wanted to help you obtain the Divine Beast Cub, but I forgot that this Divine Beast Cub has a bloodline connection with a certain terrifying family. The Tower Genie explained with a wry smile. Family of inheritance. After hearing Thaling's reminder with a wry smile, Yu Haoran's expression instantly became dignified. That's right. Thaling motioned Yu Haoran to return to the lake and find a way to settle the black bear that had returned to its original form. The Liu family is one of the oldest families in Tianxian continent. Even I, and even the previous weapon spirit, do not know when it truly originated. Lu Wu, one of the divine beasts in ancient times, second only to the 9 great kings. It has the bloodline of the white tiger and the dragon god. Lu Wu not only has the unparalleled attack power of the white tiger, but also inherited the lustful nature of the dragon god. Yu Haoran, you can guess the relationship between the two. Could it be that the people of the Liu family have the bloodline of the divine beast Lu Wu in their bodies? Yu Haoran took a deep breath and guessed in disbelief. In his previous life, although he had come into contact with some families of inheritance, most of them were families that had the bloodline of the Emperor Wu. The highest level belonged to the Guardian families. However, the origin of the Guardian families was too mysterious, and they had their own principles, so he had only come into contact with some peripheral personnel. Yu Haoran, actually, the families of inheritance in Tianxian continent are divided into 3 levels. Thinking about how Yu Haoran had already successfully comprehended the law of life when he was in the Martial King realm. Although he was restricted by the influence of his own soul and was temporarily unable to use the law of life, the sturdiest foundation had already been established, and he already had the opportunity to soar into the sky. Therefore, Thaling decided to reveal some secrets of Tianxian continent to him. Thaling, wait a moment. It seemed that Thaling was finally willing to reveal some secrets of Tianxian continent. Yu Haoran felt extremely excited, but after seeing the black bear floating on the lake, he could only think of a way to settle it down. There were many people watching by the lake, so it was not suitable to keep the black bear in the victor. At the same time, as a sacred place for young men and women to talk about love, there were no large boats. Without any other choice, Yu Haoran could only use the blood essence of the strange beast. After transforming into a Power King Kong ape, he carried the black bear to the lakeside and laid it flat on the green grass. He also gave it some top-notch healing pills. I, Qiu Rinping, bring my family's disciple, Huang Zuan, to ask for young hero Yu's forgiveness. Just as Yu Haoran had just given the black bear a healing pill and was planning to sit beside it and listen to Thaling talk about the secrets of the families of inheritance, the silver-haired elder brought the young man in embroidered clothes to his side and sincerely asked for forgiveness. Seeing Yu Haoran turn around, the silver-haired elder immediately scolded the young man in embroidered clothes sternly. Kneel. Young hero Yu, everything is Ziwen's fault. No matter how you punish me, Ziwen will not complain. Hearing Qiu Rinping's stern scolding, Huang Ziwen immediately knelt down and sincerely admitted his sins. Shifting his gaze from Huang Ziwen to the silver-haired elder Qiu Rinping, Yu Haoran said coldly. Originally, according to Yu Haoran's vengeful personality, like Huang Ziwen's provocation just now, I would definitely destroy his soul. Seeing Huang Ziwen's face instantly turn pale, Yu Haoran sighed and said with an indifferent expression, however, just now, the 7 martial saints of Yuan sect have already eliminated the murderous intent in my heart. Therefore, it is thanks to the 7 martial saints of Yuan sect that you're not dead today. Chapter 871. At the lakeside. Let's go. Yu Haoran waved his hand impatiently. Actually, the reason why he let Qiu Rinping and Huang Ziwen off and killed the 7 martial saints of a Yuan sect was to eliminate the murderous intent in his heart. The main reason was that Thaling was willing to reveal the secrets of Tianxian continent, which made him feel good at the moment. Young hero you, if one day you pass by Guangling City, you must pay a visit to the Huang clan. My Huang clan will definitely take out the utmost sincerity to entertain you. Before turning around and leaving, Qiu Rinping warmly invited. I'll see. Yu Haoran replied indifferently, neither agreeing nor refusing. Yu Haoran, could it be that you plan to make a trip to Guangling City? Yu Haoran's ambiguous reply made Thaling, who was familiar with him, guess. If I have time, maybe I'll make a trip to Guangling City. Yu Haoran replied emotionally as he watched Qiu Rinping and Huang Ziwen leave quickly. Thaling did not continue to ask about this. Under normal circumstances, Yu Haoran's emotional expression indicated that there was an enemy in Guangling City that he hated, but also a tender feeling that he could not face. And this tender feeling was very likely related to a certain woman. Thaling, now you can tell me the secrets of the different levels of the inherited families. Yu Haoran put away his emotions and sat down cross-legged, then smiled and said, Yu Haoran, it won't be too late for me to tell you after you've dealt with that woman. Thaling said teasingly. Turning his head to look, Yu Haoran discovered that the beautiful woman who was on the same boat as Huang Ziwen was slowly walking towards him. What's the matter? Yu Haoran asked with a frown. I want to talk to you. Pulling the front of her clothes and sticking out her twin peaks, the beautiful woman exuded endless temptation as she spoke. Scram! Yu Haoran's face darkened as he snapped. In order to hear Thaling talk about the secrets of the inherited families as soon as possible, he was even willing to let go of Huang Ziwen, who had offended him. How could he be in the mood to chat with Thaling? She didn't expect Yu Haoran to be so rude and rude. The beautiful woman was so angry that she didn't know what to say. I'll count to 3, Yu Haoran coldly threatened, ignoring the fatal temptation brought by the other party's heavy breathing, which caused the twin peaks on her chest to jump up and down due to her extreme anger. If I count to 3 and you don't disappear from my sight, you will stay here forever. Even a dignified martial saint expert from a first-rate sect had been killed just like that. The beautiful woman knew that the other party's threat was not a joke. If she continued to force herself to stay, she would definitely be killed by the other party. Impotence. However, when she thought of the countless handsome young men who were unable to extricate themselves from her charms, the beautiful woman turned around and left, leaving behind a humiliating sentence that no man could accept. As an expert whose physical body had reached the peak of the 9th grade Martial King realm, not only did his body not lose to the strongest exotic beast, but he was also incomparably powerful in that aspect. The word impotence had nothing to do with him at all. Now, he was actually called impotence by a beautiful woman. How could Yu Haoran accept this kind of humiliation? However, he didn't know how to refute it. Was it possible for him to fight 300 rounds with a beautiful woman and let her know how powerful he was? However, if he did that, he would definitely be letting down Qinling Fei. Looking at the beautiful woman who turned around and left, the extremely depressed Yu Haoran almost spat out blood. Fortunately, as the weapon spirit of Victor, Thaling didn't know much about impotence or impotence, nor was she interested in it. She didn't take the opportunity to make fun of him. Taking a deep breath to relieve the depression in his heart, Yu Haoran tried his best to divert his attention to the secrets of the inherited families that Thaling had already started to talk about. The first-rate inherited families mostly inherited the bloodlines of Emperor Wu and martial saints. They can rely on the continuous improvement of their cultivation and strength to gradually awaken the ancestral consciousness in their bloodlines. And these first-rate inherited families have existed for only a few 100,000 to a few million years. Hearing Thaling talk about the first-rate inherited families, Yu Haoran nodded his head and added, Thaling, I've come into contact with many first-rate inherited families in my previous life. I know that not only do they have the inheritance of their ancestral bloodlines, but most of them also have the natal magical artifacts left behind by their ancestors. That's right. Thaling nodded her head to indicate that Yu Haoran's addition was correct and continued to talk. Yu Haoran, with the speed of your cultivation and strength improvement, and with the assistance I have, you don't have to worry too much about the first-rate inherited families. If they dare to provoke you, you can just kill them. Because the true foundation of the first-rate inherited families is nothing more than the natal magical artifacts left behind by their ancestors, the remains of their ancestors, and so on. And these methods can only be used when the family is in danger of being exterminated. So, as long as you don't force them into a corner or directly kill your way into their family, they can't do anything to you. Although Thowling looked down on the first-rate inherited families, Howren, who had come into contact with them many times, didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. Thowling, in the first-rate inherited families, are there any reclusive martial saints and Emperor Wu? I don't know. In the face of Howren's questioning, Thowling thought for a while, and then gave an uncertain answer. However, according to my understanding of the first-rate inherited families, the longer the inherited families, the more likely there are reclusive martial saints in the family. As for Emperor Wu, with the foundation of the first-rate inherited families and the limitations of the ancestral bloodline, the probability of an Emperor Wu appearing is so low that it's almost negligible. I see. Thowling's further explanation allowed Howren to understand more about the first-rate inherited families that he came into contact with in his previous life, and also allowed him to completely let go of some of his fears. The second-rate inherited families are a small part of the bloodline of the martial gods. Similarly, through the continuous improvement of cultivation and strength, they can gradually awaken the ancestral consciousness in the bloodline. At this point, the tower spirit suddenly exhorted with a solemn expression, Howren, for the second-rate inherited families, try not to provoke the descendants of the second-rate inherited families before your cultivation has reached the limit of the peak of the 9th-grade martial saint, or before you have a weapon of the upper-grade emperor realm or above. Thowling, could there be a reclusive Emperor Wu in the second-rate inherited families? Chapter 872. By the Lake. That's right. Thowling asked seriously as he nodded to confirm Howren's guess. Howren, did the great mystery heart sutra that you've been cultivating come from the Yushu temple? Yes. Howren admitted with a nod. How did you get it? In my previous life, the son of the heavenly temple of the Yushu temple was hunting me down. After I killed him with poison, I got it from his storage ring. Howren answered honestly. In your previous life, did you have a deep grudge against the Yushu temple? I won't rest until I'm dead. Howren gritted his teeth as he thought about how he had been hunted down by the experts of the Yushu temple for decades in his previous life. In the end, he had no choice but to take the risk and enter the demon god's tomb. Howren, can you promise me that before you break through to the martial venerable realm, or before you master the power of triple superposition, you won't easily provoke the Yushu temple? More importantly, you can't offend the head of the Yushu temple, the heavenly temple. Thowling couldn't help but sigh when he saw Howren's deep hatred for the Yushu temple. Then he asked in a serious tone, Thowling, even if the Yushu temple has a powerful expert like the Emperor Wu, it will be difficult for him to come out in the next 100 years. Why are you so afraid of the Yushu temple? Thowling rarely asked Howren of his own accord, unless it was a very serious matter. Therefore, Howren was quite puzzled. Howren, the Yushu temple is different from ordinary families with Einherjar bloodlines. Hearing Howren's puzzled question, Thowling knew that if he didn't explain clearly, it would be difficult to make him feel enough fear of the Yushu temple. Therefore, after taking a deep breath, Thowling began to introduce the Yushu temple in detail. Normally, a family with the bloodline of the Einherjar can only produce one Emperor Wu in 10,000 years. However, the Yushu temple can produce 4 at the same time, because the founders of the Yushu temple were 4 fellow disciples of the same sect during the Middle Ages. Moreover, among the 4 brothers, 2 of them are twins. These 2 twins are the founders of the heavenly temple, the head of the 3 temples of the Yushu temple. Thowling, even if the Yushu temple has 4 Emperor Wu experts in seclusion, how can they pose a fatal threat to me when they can't come out for 100 years? Thowling's explanation made Howren feel extremely pressured. However, when he thought of his previous life, when he was hunted down by the experts of the Yushu Temple, he couldn't help but retort, "Yu Haoran, you have practiced the I Chi turning 3 pure ones technique. You should be very familiar with the art of cloning." Seeing that Yu Haoran still didn't realize how terrifying the Yushu Temple was, Thowling could only reveal a deeper secret. As a Yushu Temple Emperor Wu who has the bloodline of 4 Einar jars, don't tell me that he doesn't have the secret technique of cloning. The secret technique of cloning. When he heard Thowling suddenly mention the secret technique of cloning, Yu Haoran suddenly thought of the top sect, Xiandao school, which had been annihilated in his previous life. Logically speaking, Xiandao school, which was also one of the top 7 sects, shouldn't have been able to hold on for only 3 days before the Yushu Temple slaughtered everyone, even if their overall strength was inferior to the Yushu Temple's. Moreover, according to Thowling's explanation, Xiandao school was also one of the top clans of inheritance. It had existed for a very long time, so it must have hidden experts at the peak of the revered martial artist level, as well as a complete set of upper martial emperor level, or even a top-grade magical instrument. If the Xiandao school was annihilated in 3 days, it could only mean 2 things. Either the Yushu Temple had more powerful helpers, or there was a powerful expert at the level of Emperor Wu who had been secretly using the secret technique of cloning. Thowling, you know how Yu Haoran am. I can only say that I will try my best not to offend the people of the Yushu Temple, but I can't guarantee that I will. Yu Haoran forcefully suppressed the panic in his heart caused by his conjecture. He was a little depressed as he gave his promise. After all, the trajectory of fate is not something that you and I can control. After his rebirth, everything had started anew. Yu Haoran had chosen to forget most of the things that had happened in his previous life and let fate take its course. However, there were a few things that he couldn't let go of, and he swore that he would do them in this life. He had already done the first thing, which was to kill the first elder of the Yu clan who had humiliated him and his sister, Yusiki. The second thing was something that he didn't have the ability to do at the moment, but he had been working hard to destroy the Yushu Temple at all costs. After all, almost half of the disasters that he had suffered in his previous life were caused by the Yushu Temple. All right, let fate take its course. According to Yu Haoran's casual personality, it was very rare for him to make such a promise. And this promise wasn't because he was afraid of the Yushu Temple, but because he didn't want to worry himself too much. Therefore, Thowling didn't ask for more, and continued to talk about the third-tier inherited clans. The third-tier inherited clans inherit the bloodline of ancient divine beasts. They can continuously activate the blood essence of ancient divine beasts through their own cultivation, and finally reappear the glory of ancient divine beasts. After hearing Thowling's description of the third-tier inherited clans, Yu Haoran said with some disdain, "Thowling, for what you've said, it sounds like the third-tier inherited clans are exactly the same as the ancient divine beast bloodline." Yes and no. Thowling first nodded, then shook his head, and continued to explain. Yes, it's because the third-tier inherited clans are indeed the same as the ancient divine beasts. They need to continuously activate the blood essence of ancient divine beasts in their bloodline to obtain the bloodline inheritance of ancient divine beasts. No, it's because the third-tier inherited clans are a group of terrifying people who have inherited the strengths of both ancient divine beasts and humans. Speaking of this, Thowling pointed at the black bear behind him and asked, "Yu Haoran, if everything goes well, how long will it take for the black bear to completely activate the ancestral bloodline in its body from birth to the end? If you count carefully, I'm afraid that even 1,000,000 years is considered short." He had once talked to the black bear about the activation of the ancestral bloodline in its body, and the figure of 1,000,000 was said by the bear itself. But for the third-tier inherited clans, it will only take tens of thousands of years to completely activate the ancestral bloodline in their body. At this point, the tower spirit reminded him with a solemn expression. More importantly, because the third-tier inherited clans have inherited most of the advantages of the ancient divine beast bloodline, including a long lifespan. Yu Haoran, As you know, Wu Zun's lifespan is less than 5,000 years, and Emperor Wu's lifespan is less than 10,000 years. But for the third-tier inherited clans, a lifespan of 35,000 years is normal. There are even powerhouses like Emperor Wu who have lived for more than 100,000 years. Sizzle. Chapter 873. Beside the Lake. Yu Haoran, are you surprised? Thaling teased when he heard Yu Haoran's gasp. Thaling, could it be that they have more powerful means? Yu Haoran asked in disbelief. Most of the top divine beasts in the ancient times were above the martial god realm. They truly had the power of a god. As the third-tier inheritance family of the divine beasts, they would not be restricted by the bloodline inheritance. With their long lifespan, combined with the advantage of humans' rapid improvement in cultivation, the martial honor and Emperor Wu's realm would not be a problem for them. Thaling, you don't have to ask. Unless my cultivation can exceed Emperor Wu's realm, I would never provoke a third-tier inheritance family. Without needing Thaling's reminder, Yu Haoran took the initiative to give his guarantee. Yu Haoran, actually, I'm not worried about third-tier inheritance families. Because third-tier inheritance families are completely challenging the Heavenly Ways rules. In the past, the Heavenly Ways rules were not complete, so they could still be tolerated in the Tianxian continent. But now, as the Heavenly Ways rules are gradually becoming more complete, the Tianxian continent's supervision is getting stricter. So, as third-tier inheritance families that defy the natural order, what they really need to consider is how to protect themselves under the supervision of the Heavenly Ways rules. Seeing that Yu Haoran did not need to be reminded not to offend the third-tier inheritance families, Thaling smiled and comforted him. I see. Yu Haoran could not help but heave a sigh of relief at Thaling's comforting words. After all, the existence of third-tier inherited families did not give these ordinary geniuses with amazing talents a chance to survive. At the same time, Yu Haoran also realized that he knew too little about the Tianxian continent in his previous life. He had always thought that the inheritance families only had complete martial honor and emperor artifacts. Now, it seemed that the inheritance family's true power was far beyond his imagination. Therefore, he had to try his best to change some of his views from his previous life and re-examine his attitude toward the major forces in the Tianxian continent. Master, I'm sorry. Just as Yu Haoran was trying to change his opinion, Black Bear's weak voice suddenly came from behind him. Black Bear, you didn't do anything wrong. There's no need to apologize to me, Yu Haoran reminded him as he hurriedly got up and inspected Black Bear's injuries. After a careful inspection, Yu Haoran heaved a sigh of relief and comforted him. I'm all right. It's just that I've overdrawn my soul and bloodline. I just need to use some top-quality pills and rest for a while to recover. Master, if you think highly of me, Black Bear, I would like to sign a pet beast contract with you. If he had not been greedy for the breakthrough of grade, he would have left the cave as soon as possible. He would not have been discovered by the powerhouses of Yuan School. That way, he would not have been injured and would not have brought trouble to Yu Haoran. Now, in the face of the trouble he caused, Yu Haoran not only did not get angry, but also immediately tried to find a way to help him recover. This moved Black Bear, and he finally made a decision. In the face of Black Bear's proposal, Yu Haoran suddenly hesitated, because Black Bear was not his ideal pet beast. What he really wanted was a pet beast with a majestic appearance that gave people a strong visual effect. Moreover, it had the potential to advance to the second stage of the Emperor realm or even the first stage of the God realm in the future. However, seeing the expectation in Black Bear's eyes, Yu Haoran could not refuse flatly. Yu Haoran agreed to Black Bear's request. Just as Yu Haoran fell into hesitation, Thaling suddenly spoke in his sea of consciousness. Why? Yu Haoran asked somewhat unwillingly. After you sign a pet beast contract with Black Bear, you will know why I asked you to do this. Thaling said mysteriously. Okay. Thaling's reminder was only one reason. Yu Haoran did not have the heart to disappoint Black Bear. This was the real reason why he made up his mind. Black Bear, have you thought it through? Yu Haoran asked solemnly as he walked directly to Black Bear's head. Master, I have thought it through. Black Bear replied in a firm tone. Okay. Nodding, Howren's 10 fingers quickly formed a seal and soon condensed an imprint similar to an ancient totem. Go! Howren pointed his finger at Black Bear's forehead and shouted softly. Then, the totem-like imprint directly entered Black Bear's sea of consciousness and cut off a part of its soul. When the totemic imprint left Black Bear's sea of consciousness and appeared in midair, Howren directly cut his finger and forced out a drop of blood to flick at the totemic imprint in midair. Contract done. After the blood merged with the totemic imprint, Howren roared. Then, the totemic imprint that merged with the blood in Black Bear's soul automatically split in half. Half of the totemic imprint entered Howren's sea of consciousness and merged with his soul. And just as the totemic imprint merged with his soul, a kind of memory belonging to Black Bear's inherited bloodline rushed into his mind. Fowling, I understand. After reading the memory of Black Bear's inherited bloodline, Howren said with a hint of excitement. No regrets? Fowling asked with a smile. No regrets. Howren replied in a firm tone. Just as Howren expressed his attitude of not regretting, the other half of the totemic imprint floated above Black Bear. Then the other half of the totemic imprint gradually began to expand until it could cover the entire Black Bear. A strong suction force directly sucked Black Bear lying flat on the grass into the totemic imprint. Then, the totemic imprint quickly shrunk and imprinted on Howren's left wrist. Howren, as a reward for the heavenly axiom's rules, an independent space for the beast pet, although the special energy in the pet space can speed up the recovery of Black Bear's injuries, it has overdrawn too much of its soul and bloodline after all. The special energy is not very effective for the recovery of soul and bloodline, so you'll need to continue to use the best elixirs to help it recover quickly. When the totemic imprint of Black Bear's totemic imprint was on Howren's wrist, he quickly reminded him for fear that he did not understand the fouling of the pet space. I know. Nodding, Howren indicated that he understood. At the same time, he took out more than 10 elixirs that could be used to recover the soul and replenish blood essence, and pressed them directly on the imprint on his wrist. Without any obstruction, the elixirs directly entered the pet space. Black Bear, since we have signed a pet beast contract, you and I can communicate telepathically. After sending the elixirs into the pet space, Howren raised his arm and said to the totemic imprint, "The moment you completely recover, inform me immediately so that you can come out in time." Master, I understand. Chapter 874. Sorry, I'm stuck. I've been delayed for more than an hour. By the lake. Howren, do you plan to leave this place? Or do you plan to continue boating on the lake to relax? Fowling had dealt with all the troubles and told Howren all the secrets he wanted to know. Now, he wanted to know what Howren's next plan was. Let's leave, Howren said helplessly after looking around. Although the aura of the 7 martial sages from the Yuan sect had caused countless ships to be destroyed, the young men and women standing by the lake did not choose to leave. Instead, most of them cast their gazes towards him. The feeling of being stared at made him feel very uncomfortable, so he planned to leave. If that's the case, let's go to the mountain 15 kilometers northeast of the lake. Fowling immediately suggested when he saw Howren planning to leave. Why? Howren immediately asked. After all, it was not suitable for him to continue improving his cultivation in his current state. He needed to find a way to relax and get rid of the violent emotions in his body caused by his rapid increase in cultivation. He had used his divine sense to check the mountain that Fowling had mentioned earlier. Although his divine sense could only extend to 15 kilometers with his current cultivation, and he could not clearly see the situation in the mountain, he could sense that there were several powerful 5th-rank Emperor Realm exotic beasts hidden in the mountain. Instead of choosing a scenic place to relax, he took the risk and barged into the mountain where the 5th-rank Emperor Realm exotic beasts lived. How could Howren not be puzzled by Fowling's suggestion? Refine the copper bell. Fowling explained. That's great. Howren could not help but exclaim excitedly. he would refine the embryo of the copperbell technique, then use the secret method to improve the grade and power of the copperbell. Finally, he would refine it into his natal magic weapon. This was what he had always wanted to do since his rebirth. Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Yu Haoran was about to take to the air and leave this place. A handsome young man in his 20s with a gentle temperament suddenly strode towards him. As he walked, the handsome young man smiled and called out, "Young hero, please stop." "What's up?" Perhaps it was because of his gentle attitude that made people feel very comfortable. Perhaps it was because of the black bear's special background that he was in a good mood. Yu Haoran asked in a relatively calm manner as he faced the handsome young man who was walking quickly towards him. "Young hero, you've traveled thousands of miles to come here. You must be here to watch the competition between the two heroes." About 2 meters away from Yu Haoran, the handsome young man suddenly stopped and asked a question that made Yu Haoran feel baffled. "What's a competition between two heroes?" Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. The handsome youth frowned slightly when he saw that Yu Haoran didn't even know about the competition between the two heroes that caused a sensation in the Southern Territory. However, when he saw Yu Haoran's face gradually turn gloomy, he quickly explained with a smile. The so-called competition between the two heroes refers to the competition between the two most outstanding young heroes of the Southern Territory. The most outstanding young heroes of the Southern Territory? After hearing the handsome young man's explanation, Yu Haoran was shocked and asked with a hint of excitement in his voice, "Could it be Gu Liangzi, known as the Gentleman's Sword, and the armless swordsman, Gu Quan?" The Gentleman's Sword, Gu Liangzi, came from the Gu Liang clan, a first-rate family of inheritance. He was the most outstanding representative of the younger generation of the Gu Liang clan. He was only 20 years old this year. Not only was his cultivation at the peak of the 9th grade martial royal realm, but he had also successfully comprehended the law of inches, which could increase the power of his swordsmanship by 3 to 5 times. At the same time, he was also a demon-level genius who could challenge a martial sage expert. The armless swordsman, Gu Quan, was a wandering cultivator who walked alone in the Jianghu. However, at the same time, he was a person who refused to admit defeat and was unwilling to bow to fate. He was a person who dared to risk his life. Now, he was only 20 years old. Not only was his cultivation at the peak of the 9th grade martial royal realm, but he had also comprehended the law of severing in advance, which could increase the power of his swordsmanship by 3 to 5 times. Once, with the help of the law of severing, he had killed a first-grade martial sage expert in the solid stage. The reason why Yu Haoran was interested in these two people was because of the Hidden Dragon ranking competition in October. Not only did these two people successfully enter the top 100, but they were also ranked 49th and 50th in the end. In his previous life, he was limited by his cultivation. Not only was he not qualified to participate in the Hidden Dragon ranking competition, but he also did not have the strength and opportunity to observe the Hidden Dragon ranking. Therefore, he knew nothing about the strength of the top 100 contestants of the Hidden Dragon ranking and what kind of powerful techniques they had. If he could watch the competition between Gu Liangzi and Gu Quan in advance, he would be able to understand the situation of his opponents in the Hidden Dragon ranking competition in 10 months. It would also be convenient for him to make a reasonable cultivation plan based on the situation he knew. That's right. Seeing that Yu Haoran had heard the names of these two talents, the handsome young man nodded with a smile. "When and where?" Yu Haoran immediately asked. "In 3 days, Peach Blossom Town, above the Peach Blossom Orchard." "Thank you for telling me. I will definitely go and watch the competition in 3 days." After leaving his attitude, Yu Haoran directly rose into the air and left the scene like lightning. Refining the bronze bell was only the first step. Next, he needed to use a secret method to increase the grade and power of the bronze bell, which would take a certain amount of time. Therefore, in order to be able to watch the competition between the two talents smoothly, he had to seize the time to refine and upgrade the bronze bell. Looking at Yu Haoran directly leaving in the air, the smile on the handsome young man's face was instantly replaced by a gloomy expression. in a situation where they did not know each other. There was only one reason why the handsome young man was so enthusiastic to tell Howard this news. He wanted to rope him in and let him help him fulfill his wish. "Miss, are you okay?" Seeing the handsome young man's gloomy face, a middle-aged man of about 40 years old instantly appeared beside him and asked carefully, "Wang Hua, how many times have I told you? Young master is now a woman disguised as a man. Outside, you have to call me young master." The handsome young man was already in a very bad mood. After hearing that his subordinate had made such an obvious mistake, he ordered with a cold expression, "If you make such a mistake next time, you could directly kill yourself." "Yes, young master. I promise that I will not make such a mistake again." Facing the handsome young man's cold order, the middle-aged man, who was already at the peak of the third-grade martial saint, secretly breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly promised, "Now go to Peach Blossom Town and wait for the surnamed you to appear." Looking up in the direction where Howard disappeared, the handsome young man gritted his teeth and ordered, Chapter 875. For Howard, who was as fast as lightning, the 30-kilometer journey only took a few blinks of an eye, and he successfully arrived at the mountain peak. This time, his goal in entering the mountain peak was only to refine and upgrade the bronze bell, not to use exotic beasts to increase his strength and consolidate his cultivation base. As such, when he stepped into the mountain peak, Howard did his best to conceal his aura to prevent exotic beasts from discovering him, which would lead to unnecessary slaughter. Fortunately, the cave suitable for refining and upgrading the bronze bell was halfway up the mountain. There weren't any exotic beasts with high grades around, allowing him to enter the cave smoothly. Although the cave wasn't very big, it had an abundance of spiritual chi. Moreover, the original owner of the cave was a 7th-rank, 3rd-rank Grandmaster Realm Star Spot cat that paid more attention to hygiene. As such, the entire cave was very clean. After using his aura to stun the Star Spot cat, Howard chose the spot where the Star Spot cat usually meditated and sat down cross-legged. "Howard, here you go." Thowling reminded Howard when it saw that everything was ready. Then it directly gave him a 3-meter-tall bell that was dark yellow all over. Countless stars revolved around it, while the earth, fire, wind, and water revolved around it. Howard was completely stunned when he saw the 3-meter-tall bronze bell given to him by Thowling. "Thowling, you must have a good relationship with that bronze bell." Howard guessed after recovering from his shock. The sun, moon, and stars were densely packed, and the earth, fire, wind, and water were baked. The appearance of the bronze bell in front of him was exactly the same as the bronze bell he had seen in the Forbidden Land in his previous life. To be able to reproduce the bronze bell's final form so perfectly, it wasn't something that could be replicated simply by looking at it a few times. That was why Howard suspected that Thowling had an unusual relationship with the bronze bell. Howard, it's not that I don't want to tell you the origin of the bronze bell, but it's related to the secrets of the destruction of the ancient and Middle Ages. Even the martial gods of the ancient and Middle Ages didn't know the true origin of the bronze bell, let alone you. Thowling explained with an unusually serious expression when faced with Howard's guess. "Now, the only thing I can tell you is that I once fought alongside the weapon spirit of the bronze bell." "Thowling, don't worry." Howard could feel a trace of sadness in Thowling's serious tone. He knew that the weapon spirit of the bronze bell didn't have a good ending. "Thowling, Howard old, Thowling, 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 if you don't want to talk about the origin of the magic weapon, I won't bring it up again." Howard, thank you." Thowling was very touched by Howard's understanding. First, Howard took out several level 4 spirit stones from his storage ring, as well as a few pills that could quickly restore his spirit in Yuanli. Then, he took a deep breath and immediately formed a seal with his 10 fingers. Howard entered the process of refining the bronze bell. Just as Howard's seal was imprinted on the bronze bell, a dead planet hundreds of millions of light years away from the cave suddenly shook violently. Following the violent shaking of the planet, countless gray rocks were directly shaken into powder. A strong gust of wind blew, and countless gray powder was swept up by the wind, revealing the dark yellow surface of the planet beneath the powder. Mind-calling. It seems that Small Tower used his superb refining techniques to imitate my original body. Just as the dark yellow surface of the planet was revealed, an old and weak voice suddenly sounded from all directions. Now, my original body is about to shatter, and my spirit is on the verge of collapse. Perhaps the dark bell refined by Small Tower is the only way for me to be reborn. As the voice muttered to itself, a small dark yellow bell gradually condensed on the surface of the dead planet. The small dark yellow bell quickly spun on the spot. As it spun faster and faster, one dark yellow seal after another appeared around the small bell. When a number of dark yellow seals reached 36, the small dark yellow bell immediately stopped spinning. Small Tower, whether or not Third Brother can be reborn smoothly will all depend on the magic weapon you refined. As the voice that was full of expectation disappeared, the small dark yellow bell suddenly exploded. The terrifying power of the explosion directly sent the 36 dark yellow seals into the Tianxian continent. What a pity, seeing the 36 dark yellow seals fall in different directions of the Tianxian continent. A sigh came from the dead planet. I hope that the master that Small Tower follows is a guy who likes to adventure. Otherwise, if I can't collect enough dark yellow seals within 100 years, my bell of chaos will completely disappear from this world. After the sigh ended, the gray powder that was originally swept up by the wind fell back on the planet, covering the dark yellow body that was just revealed. Inside the cave, as one seal after another fell on the bronze bell magic weapon, a weak connection gradually formed between Yu Haoran and the bronze bell in front of him. As more and more seals merged into the bronze bell magic weapon, the weak connection continued to strengthen and finally formed a complete mental connection, as if it was his own body. After finishing the seal of refining, Yu Haoran softly shouted at the bronze bell magic weapon in front of him, "Withdraw." With the word "withdraw," the bronze bell magic weapon that was originally more than 3 meters tall instantly shrank to the size of a small bell and directly entered his sea of consciousness, and then merged into his spirit. Yu Haoran, how do you feel? Seeing the bronze bell magic weapon merge into Yu Haoran's spirit, Thowling seemed calm, but in fact he was very nervous. Carefully feeling the bronze bell magic weapon that merged into his spirit, Yu Haoran looked shocked and exclaimed, "It can stretch out like a purple rod, and it can cover the sky and contain the earth. It can blast the sky and shake the earth." Then, he couldn't help but question, "Thowling, is this really a bronze bell embryo that you casually refined in 5 days? How is it's passable?" Thowling replied arrogantly. In this regard, Yu Haoran could only roll his eyes at him, and then take out the bronze bell magic weapon again. "Yu Haoran, what are you trying to do?" Today's bronze bell magic weapon, apart from being able to freely change its size and being relatively sturdy, did not have any offensive or defensive power. Therefore, he was very puzzled by Yu Haoran's action of taking out the bronze bell magic weapon again. "Refining weapons," Yu Haoran replied simply, and then took out 99 low-grade zone realm magic weapons from his storage ring. Closing his eyes, he carefully recalled the secret refining method that he had accidentally obtained in his previous life, the furnace of heaven and earth. After memorizing the secret method of the furnace of heaven and earth, Yu Haoran picked up a low-grade zone realm sword and threw it directly into the air. Chapter 876. Inside the cave. After the Copper Bell Dharma artifact enveloped the low-grade Grandmaster Realm Sword, Yu Haoran immediately used the artifact refining secret technique to control the Copper Bell and directly shattered the sword. Then, the devouring power formed by the secret refining technique directly absorbed the essence of the shattered sword into the bronze bell. After absorbing the essence of the first low-grade zone realm sword, the originally dim yellow color of the Copper Bell deepened slightly. in the sea of consciousness. Looking at the bronze bell that had deepened slightly, Thaling's expression gradually became serious. When you Howren threw out the second and third low-grade zone realm magic weapons, the copper bell also absorbed the essence of the second and third low-grade zone realm magic weapons. A thought suddenly flashed through the tower spirit's mind. The worldly cauldron refinement technique, the tower spirit exclaimed in shock as it stood up. Thaling, you also know about the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth. Yu Howren asked in surprise after hearing Thaling's words. In his previous life, when he obtained the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth, the remnant divine will of a senior at the scene had mentioned it. Whether it was during the ancient times or the Middle Ages, no one knew the secret of the great furnace of heaven and earth. No one knew the secret of the great furnace of heaven and earth. This was because the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth was a heaven-defying secret refining technique created by him alone. He was the top refining master of the ancient antiquity age and one of the few who was able to survive the crisis of the ancient antiquity age and the Middle Age until the modern age, Thaling said with a wry smile as he sat cross-legged again. Amazing. To be able to cross 3 eras, survive the second calamity of the destruction of heaven and earth, and create such a heaven-defying refining method as the great furnace of heaven and earth. Yu Howren was shocked after hearing the introduction of the tower spirit to the old man of Heaven Wasteland. Yu Howren, the previous weapon spirit of the victor, had a good relationship with the great furnace of heaven and earth. I once heard him mention this secret refining technique that relied on devouring the essence of other weapons to advance. However, at that time, countless experts who were proficient in refining thought that the great furnace of heaven and earth was crazy. How could he create such a heaven-defying technique that went against the rules of refining weapons? After all, in addition to the fusion of different materials, the most important part of a weapon's composition is the formation inside the weapon. Therefore, at that time, countless experts who were proficient in refining mocked and ridiculed him, including my previous weapon spirit. At this point, Thaling could not help but laugh bitterly. I really did not expect that after experiencing the trials of the ancient antiquity age and the Middle Age, this heaven-defying technique that completely went against the rules of refining weapons was actually created by him. Hearing Thaling's description, Yu Howren could not help but frown and ask, Thaling, although the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth is heaven-defying, is it really as difficult as you said? Yu Howren, you're not a weapon refiner, so you don't understand the mysteries of refining weapons. Hearing Yu Howren's slight contempt for the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth, Thaling immediately criticized and explained unhappily. Refining weapons is different from refining pills. Pills can be refined by neutralizing different medicinal powers and using special methods to fuse and improve the grade of the pills. However, the real core method of refining weapons is the construction and ordering of the formation inside the weapon. There can't be any deviation. Thaling, just now I used the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth to improve the grade and power of the copper bell, and then combined it with your explanation of refining weapons. Facing Thaling's criticism, Yu Howren was not convinced and retorted. I think in ancient times, you all fell into a misunderstanding, or perhaps you lacked a flash of inspiration. Yu Howren, quickly say it. Although Yu Howren was not a weapon refiner and did not know much about refining weapons, he had explored countless relics and forbidden areas in his previous life, and had come into contact with many secrets that even he did not know. Perhaps he could explain the real reason why the old man of heaven and earth created the secret refining technique of the great furnace of heaven and earth. Thaling, the flash of inspiration I mentioned just now, was referring to the blood demon who created the secret technique of swallowing the heavens and devouring the earth. Yu Howren reminded, the secret technique of swallowing the heavens and devouring the earth. Yu Howren's reminder reminded Thaling of the heaven-defying ability of the secret technique of swallowing everything, and he immediately fell into deep thought. After waiting for a few minutes and seeing that there was no response from Thowling, Yuhauran knew that he must be using the secret technique of swallowing to study the reason the old man of heaven and earth had created the secret refining technique. Therefore, he did not continue to wait for Thowling's reply, but continued to use the low-grade zone realm magic weapons to increase the grade and power of the bronze bell. As more and more essence of the low-grade zone realm magic weapons were absorbed into the bronze bell, its vibration and devouring power grew stronger and stronger. In the beginning, it could only shatter and devour 1 or 2 low-grade zone realm magic weapons. Now, the bronze bell could shatter and devour 7 low-grade zone realm magic weapons in one go. The 99 low-grade zone realm magic weapons were quickly consumed by the bronze bell's increasing vibration and devouring power. After the last low-grade zone realm magic weapon was devoured by the bronze bell's body instantly tripled in size, and the sun, moon, and stars on the bell shone brightly, and the mysteries of earth, fire, wind, and water began to deepen. When the size of the bronze bell had completely stabilized, the sun, moon, and stars dimmed again, and the earth, fire, wind, and water returned to normal, the bronze bell automatically vibrated and let out a low rumble. Not good. Thowling, who had been awakened by the low rumble of the bronze bell, immediately warned after realizing that something was wrong. Yuhauran, the cave is about to be shattered by the rumble. Hurry up and leave the cave. As soon as he withdrew his consciousness, the bronze bell immediately shrank and returned to his sea of consciousness. At the same time, Yuhauran used his fastest speed to leave the cave before the rubble and powder fell from above. Thowling, the bronze bell has only just reached the low-grade zone realm, and that was just the sound produced when it was upgraded. Yuhauran said with a shocked expression as he pointed at the mountain peak that was collapsing due to the collapse of the cave. This is too terrifying. Yuhauran, you must know that the bronze bell that I refined was infused with 64 top refining materials. In the face of Yuhauran's shocked exclamation, Thowling explained as if it was normal. Moreover, it just devoured the essence of 99 low-grade zone realm magic weapons, so it is completely normal for it to have such power. Chapter 877. In front of the mountain peak. Yuhauran, is it true that the bronze bell needs to devour 99 weapons of the same level every time it advances? That's right. Yuhauran nodded and confirmed. Sizzle. After getting Yuhauran's confirmation, Thowling could not help but gasp and remind him worriedly. Yuhauran, collecting Master Realm, King Realm, and Emperor Realm artifacts isn't a problem at all. With our current strength, it won't be difficult to collect them. But where are we going to find thousands of weapons of the Saint, Venerable, and Emperor Realms? Pagoda's spirit, as the saying goes, when the car reaches the mountain, there will be a way. When the boat reaches the bridge, it will cross the bridge. Maybe by the time the bronze bell advances to the Saint, Venerable, and Emperor Realms, you and I will have found 99 weapons. Compared to Thowling's worries, Yuhauran was quite relaxed and comforted him. Moreover, with the power that the bronze bell displayed just now, maybe we'll have the power of an Emperor Realm weapon when it advances to the highest level of the Saint Realm. Then, why should I be in a hurry to improve its level and power? Seeing that Yuhauran had thought it through so thoroughly, Thowling could only shake his head with a wry smile and did not say anything more. Due to his low cultivation in his previous life, he did not know much about the Tianshan continent. He did not know about the real dangers of the Tianshan continent, nor did he know that in the distant starry sky, there were some old immortals from the ancient, middle, and recent times. As the rules of the heavenly Tao were gradually perfected, some experts who had long disappeared in the long river of history would gradually appear on the Tianshan continent to fight for the only chance of survival. In the future, when you grow bigger, you can cover the sky and the sun. When you shrink, you can blend into the sand and dust. You will have the strongest defense in the world and unparalleled attack power. Taking out the bronze bell that had merged with his divine soul, Yuhaoran looked forward to the bronze bell's future abilities while thinking quickly. Having such a perfect shape and ability is just what I want. At this point, Yuhaoran pointed at the bronze bell with a solemn expression. From now on, you shall be called the Rui Bell. Upon hearing the name Yuhaoran gave it, the copper bell, floating in the air, immediately emitted a faint, mysterious yellow aura. Obviously, it was very satisfied with the name Yuhaoran had just given it. Thaling, who was in his knowledge sea, was stunned for a moment before he sneered in disdain. Yuhaoran, you could be considered a cultured person who has read a lot, but you actually gave this copper bell such a vulgar name. The result of this will not only lower your status as a grandmaster, but also damage my Thaling's reputation in the field of refining. In the face of Thaling's ridicule, Yuhaoran retorted shamelessly, I make the decision on my weapon. I can name it whatever I want. In fact, with his cultural upbringing, no matter if it was elegant or domineering, no matter if it was exquisite or majestic, he could easily come up with dozens of nice names. But there was a thorn in his heart, a thorn that he had once looked down upon. He wanted to use the Rui Bell in his hand to completely pull out the thorn that had once hurt him. In the face of the shameless Yuhaoran, Thaling was suddenly speechless. Ouch! Just as Yuhaoran put away the Rui Bell again, an angry roar suddenly came from the mountain in front of him. It seems that the collapse of the mountain caused by the collapse of the cave just now has angered the real overlord of this mountain. Hearing the angry roar, Thaling gently scanned with his divine thoughts and then smiled at Yuhaoran. Yuhaoran, if you don't want to fight, you'd better leave here immediately. Without any hesitation, Yuhaoran turned and left directly, and then went straight to Peach Blossom Town thousands of miles away. Peach Blossom Town, located 70 miles east of Guangling City, was a town surrounded by countless peach blossom trees. In Peach Blossom Town, not only was the scenery beautiful and the spiritual qi abundant, but the whole town was also filled with the fragrance of peach blossoms. Rather than calling it a town, it was better to call it a holy place for high officials and nobles to go for a spring vacation. Because the whole town was divided into different areas, each area was full of courtyards, streams, and pavilions. It was a place of wealth and splendor, which was simply not a place that ordinary people could afford to live in. In March and April, the peach blossoms would bloom. Yuhaoran, who had hurried over, floated in the sky above Peach Blossom Town. Looking down at the town surrounded by countless blooming peach blossoms, a relaxed expression immediately appeared on his face. Yuhaoran, there are still 6 days before the opening of the secret territory. Why don't you stay in Peach Blossom Town during this time to cultivate and get rid of the tyrannical emotions in your body? Thaling, who was also attracted by the beautiful scenery of Peach Blossom Town, could not help but suggest, if nothing unexpected happens, I will rest here for a few days. Yuhaoran said with some uncertainty. This was because, regardless of whether he was a jinx or Thaling was a jinx, as long as they appeared, it often meant trouble. Therefore, he did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to live in Peach Blossom Town smoothly. Young hero you. Just as Yuhaoran and Thaling were discussing which courtyard to choose as the next place to cultivate, a surprised voice called out to them. Looking through the gaps of the peach blossoms, Yuhaoran saw that in an elegant courtyard in the center of the town, the handsome young man who had reminded him of the martial arts competition was standing in the courtyard's pavilion and waving at him. Frowning slightly, a trace of hesitation flashed through Yuhaoran's heart. However, after seeing the anticipation in the handsome young man's eyes, he finally let out a long sigh and flew into the courtyard. Young hero you, I didn't expect you to be so punctual, the handsome young man said with a smile as he watched Yuhaoran striding toward the pavilion. There's something I don't know if I should say. After entering the pavilion and looking at the handsome young man's snow-white skin, Yuhaoran finally decided to tell the truth after much consideration. Young hero you, please speak. The handsome young man gestured with his left hand with a smile. In the Tianxian continent, apart from some special techniques and treasures, there are only a few ways to conceal the change between genders. Simply by changing one's attire and voice, not only will it not achieve the goal of changing one's gender, but it will also attract the attention of others. Looking at the handsome young man who thought himself infallible, Yu Haoran directly revealed the other party's true identity. The smile on his face instantly disappeared, and a faint murderous aura filled the handsome young man's eyes. I'm just speaking the truth. Sensing the murderous aura in the handsome young man's eyes, Yu Haoran shook his head and kindly reminded him as he turned to leave the pavilion. Chapter 878. Working overtime at the last minute. I'll check the book review section for the November update. Peach Blossom Town, in the courtyard. Young hero Yu, please wait. Seeing Yu Haoran turn to leave the pavilion, the handsome young man hurriedly urged him to stay. Miss, ever since Yu Haoran, made my debut, no matter if it was a quasi-martial honorable or an ordinary person without the strength to trust a chicken, as long as they dared to kill me, now, they've all turned into a pile of dirt. After hearing the handsome young man's request to stay, Yu Haoran stopped in his tracks and reminded him in a calm tone with a hint of coldness. Seeing that you took the initiative to remind me of the martial arts competition 3 days ago, I'll let you live today. Then, he directly rose into the air, intending to leave the courtyard. Young hero Yu, I was wrong, I apologize. Seeing Yu Haoran rise into the air, the handsome young man gritted his teeth and took the initiative to admit his mistake. I'm sorry. Hearing the other party take the initiative to admit his mistake and apologize, Yu Haoran laughed coldly in his heart, then returned to the pavilion. Who are you? Yu Haoran asked indifferently as he sat down on the stone squat in the pavilion. My surname is Dongfang, and my name is Ting. Seeing Yu Haoran sit down without waiting for her, the host, to invite him, Dongfang Ting angrily introduced herself. Among the clans with surnames in the Tianxian continent, only the Namling mountain range and the eastern region's Morning Sun Peak have clans with the surname Dongfang. Hearing Dongfang Ting's introduction, Yu Haoran slightly raised his eyebrows, then pretended to be thinking, then pointed out 2 possible places where the other party might have been born. I wonder if you were born in the southern region or the eastern region. Are you stupid? Faced with Yu Haoran's interrogation, Dongfang Ting could not help but roll her eyes and mock him. I'm a mere 7th grade martial king cultivator. How could I directly cross the entire central region and appear in the southern region's Peach Blossom Town? Ignoring Dongfang Ting's mockery, Yu Haoran said with a cold smile. It's hard to say. After all, who doesn't know that the Dongfang family of the eastern region is not only a famous family of inheritance, but also one of the few holy lands in the profound sky continent that can control the teleportation formation. Yu, how do you know so much about the eastern region's Dongfang clan? Dongfang Ting, who had already sat down, immediately stood up in shock after hearing Yu Haoran's evaluation of the Dongfang family in the eastern region. Just as Dongfang Ting stood up in shock, a middle-aged man at the peak of the 3rd grade martial saint instantly appeared in the pavilion and glared at Yu Haoran. Put away the anger in your heart. Otherwise, I will let you enjoy the treatment of the 7 martial saints of the Yi Yuan sect. Yu Haoran threatened the middle-aged man with a murderous look. When he thought of how the 7 martial saints of the Yuan sect had been dissected and analyzed, a trace of fear immediately emerged in the middle-aged man's eyes. Wang Hua, stand down. Dongfang Ting, who had finally calmed down from the shock in her heart, hurriedly reprimanded Wang Hua when she saw him barge into the pavilion and clash with Yu Haoran. Yes, young master. Wang Hua hurriedly responded and left the pavilion at lightning speed. However, when he stood beside the flower bushes about 20 meters away from the pavilion, he realized that his back was already drenched in cold sweat. Speak. Seeing that Dongfang Ting had sat down again, Yu Haoran got straight to the point. Young hero Yu, what do you mean? Dongfang Ting was slightly taken aback and asked, pretending to be confused. Dongfang Ting, I'm a rather impatient person and I like to do things in a straightforward manner. Therefore, it is best that you don't beat around the bush. Otherwise, you might refuse to help because you feel unhappy in your heart. Yu Haoran reminded her threateningly. Yu Haoran's reminder was already so clear. If she continued to play the fool, It might really be like what he said and end up making a fool of herself. I want to make a bet with someone. The bet is that each side will send an expert to fight. The winner will win, and the loser will lose. If that's the case, you want me to be your hired thug? Yu Haoran pointed out with a cold smile. Wrong. Dongfang Ting purposely reminded him with her beautiful eyes. A helper, not a hired thug. There is a fundamental difference between the two. 3 questions. Raising his left hand and pointing 3 fingers, Yu Haoran indicated. Young hero, you please come in. Seeing that Yu Haoran did not immediately reject her request, Dongfang Ting hurriedly straightened her attitude and listened carefully. Who is the person you are betting with? She retracted a finger. Gu Liangyi, what is the bet? She retracted a second finger. An incomplete array diagram. When he heard that the bet was an incomplete array diagram, Yu Haoran's eyes immediately flashed. Fortunately, Dongfang Ting, who was focused on asking questions, did not notice. My reward. She retracted a third finger. A level 5, level 9 Qi Shun pill. Miss Dongfang, farewell. Hearing that the reward was only a level 5, level 9 Qi Shun pill, Yu Haoran slammed the stone table and stood up to leave. He did not hesitate to walk out of the pavilion. Young hero Yu, regarding the reward, we can continue to discuss it. Seeing that Yu Haoran had suddenly turned hostile and directly left the pavilion, although Dongfang Ting's heart was filled with hatred, she had no choice but to immediately urge him to stay. Miss Dongfang, I forgot to tell you about my other identity. Yu Haoran stopped in his tracks, but did not turn back. He forcefully suppressed his anger and said, Yu Haoran, am not only a peak alchemy grandmaster, I can also refine level 4 and level 7 Nirvana pills. You took out a level 5 pill that I usually use to feed my pet beast. Are you trying to humiliate me, Yu Haoran? Having said that, Yu Haoran rose into the air and flew out of the courtyard, ignoring Dongfang Ting's pleas. After hearing that Yu Haoran had revealed his identity as a peak alchemy grandmaster before leaving, Dongfang Ting was completely stunned. Seeing Yu Haoran leave the courtyard without hesitation, the pagoda's spirit in his sea of consciousness could not help but remind him. Yu Haoran, actually, you can use this opportunity to humiliate him and exchange the request to view the incomplete formation. Fouling, things are not as simple as you think. While dealing with Fouling's question, Yu Haoran observed his surroundings. Finally, his gaze fell on a peach tree with a diameter of more than 2 meters. He slowly landed on the top of the peach tree, then sat down cross-legged and continued to explain Fouling's question. In my past life, I trained in the eastern region for a period of time and had also come into contact with the Dongfang family of the Morning Sun Peak. I know about their history and their heritage, and they're not inferior to the Guliang family at all. Chapter 879. Peach Blossom Town. Fouling, as the daughter of the clan leader of the first-rate inheritance family, has gone to a foreign place alone. Only a peak third-grade martial saint is assigned to protect her. Yu Haoran asked with a cold smile, Do you think this is normal? After hearing Yu Haoran's reminder, Fouling immediately spread out her divine sense and carefully observed the situation within a radius of a few hundred kilometers. Finally, she frowned and said, Yu Haoran, that woman, Dongfang Ting, seems to only be protected by that martial saint named Wang Hua. That's right. After hearing Fouling's reminder, Yu Haoran was not surprised at all and said with a smile, It seems that Dongfang Ting and Gu Yangzi are not the only 2 juniors participating in the bet. I'm afraid that the experts of the families behind them are secretly wrestling with each other. If I agree to Dongfang Ting's request, if I win, I will definitely offend the Guliang family. If I lose, I will offend the Dongfang family. If that's the case, then I might as well offend Dongfang Ting directly. At least I can calmly face Dongfang Ting's revenge. I see. Yu Haoran's detailed explanation made Fouling deeply feel that the human heart was sinister. At the same time, she was gratified by his keen insight. However, her gratification only lasted for 3 seconds. Fouling could not help but shake her head and smile bitterly. She had just arrived in Peach Blossom Town and had not even had time to take a breather and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the Peach Blossom Garden. If she offended Dongfang Ting of the Dongfang family, wouldn't that prove that Yu Haoran was a jinx? However, despite her bitter smile, Faling still wanted to know his next plan. I'll continue to stay in Peach Blossom Town and watch the battle between the two heroes. Without any hesitation, Yu Haoran made the decision to continue staying. What about Dongfang Ting's threat? Faling asked. If she's smart enough, she'd better not provoke me. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Yu Haoran said with a cold smile. All right, ruthlessly destroying a flower would definitely offend the Dongfang clan. But considering that the Dongfang clan's foundation was in the eastern region, it would not pose a fatal threat to Yu Haoran in a short period of time, so Faling agreed to his decision to continue staying. Whether it was Gu Yongzi from the Gu Yang clan or the one-armed swordsman Gu Quan, they were both famous young talents in the southern region. Therefore, the sparring between the two of them attracted the attention of many people. While Yu Haoran was leaning against a tree trunk, drinking wine, and enjoying the beautiful scenery of peach blossoms, more and more experts had come to watch the battle. They were either sitting in a pavilion in the courtyard, floating in the air, or, like Yu Haoran, choosing a peach tree as a resting place. Brat Scram. Good wine and fresh flowers were the most intoxicating atmosphere. Under the influence of this completely relaxed atmosphere, Yu Haoran's violent emotions were quickly calming down. But at this moment, a strong man about 30 years old with a cultivation at the peak of the third-grade martial king suddenly broke this intoxicating atmosphere. Opening his eyes, Yu Haoran looked at the strong man with a cold light flashing in his eyes and said indifferently, "Either kneel down and apologize or die." Huh. Hearing Yu Haoran's two choices, the strong man couldn't help but laugh wildly as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. Brat, I'll give you two choices now. Either kneel down and apologize or die. When the wild laughter ended, the strong man threatened fiercely. It seems that you've made your choice. Putting away the gourd containing the 100 flowers fragrance in his hand, Yu Haoran stood up and directly activated the blood essence of the large power king Kong ape in his acupoints. A few days ago, through the battle with the 5th stage martial king exotic beast, with his current strength, even without the help of the exotic beast's blood essence, it was not impossible for him to defeat the strong man with a cultivation at the peak of the 3rd-grade martial king. However, he would need at least dozens of moves to defeat the other party. And in his current state, it was not suitable for him to be entangled with his opponent for too long. Otherwise, the tyrannical emotions that had been suppressed with great difficulty recently would probably affect his state of mind again. Moreover, he still had two very important things that he needed to do with a calm state of mind. Therefore, he could only use the blood essence of the large power king Kong ape to end the battle quickly. Brat, it seems that you've already made your choice. The energy fluctuations formed by Yu Haoran activating the blood essence of the exotic beast let the brawny man know that the young man in front of him was planning to fight to the death. A mere peak of the 8th-grade martial king actually dared to make a move against him, a peak of the 3rd-grade martial king. A sense of humiliation from being looked down upon made him laugh sinisterly. However, when Yu Haoran's body quickly increased in size and quickly turned into a mighty large power king Kong ape, the brawny man's face instantly darkened, and he immediately turned to leave. After offending me, you still want to leave unscathed? Aren't you looking down on me, Yu Haoran? Looking at the brawny man who had turned to leave, Yu Haoran, who had transformed into a large power king Kong ape, said with a cold smile, "Prince Consort Ma, can you give face to the Liu family of Feng City and let me live?" To be able to transform into a large power king Kong ape and take the initiative to shout out his name, the brawny man, who already knew of Yu Haoran's true origins, finally stopped and turned around to beg. The face of the Liu family. Hearing that the other party was from the Liu family of the Feng City of the Emperor Qin, Yu Haoran was stunned for a moment. Immediately after, boundless anger gushed out from his heart. After all, who in the entire great Emperor Qin didn't know that he, Yu Haoran, was a lawless person who did as he pleased. After knowing his true identity, he still dared to use the family behind him to threaten him. How could Yu Haoran not feel angry? Today, even if your Liu family's quasi-martial Saint Realm ancestor personally descends, I will still turn him into the nourishment of this 10,000 acres of peach blossoms. Prince Consort Ma, if my Liu family's face is not enough, then I wonder what the Empress Dowager's face is. Yu Haoran's contempt for the Liu family caused endless resentment to emerge from the brawny man's heart. However, he knew that with Yu Haoran's strength and status, he really wasn't afraid of the Liu family, so he immediately brought out an even stronger backer. Originally, if you could obediently kneel down and kowtow to admit your wrongs, perhaps on account of meeting an old friend in a foreign land, I would have let you live. Seeing that the brawny man had actually brought out the purple-clothed woman who had once humiliated him and caused him to let Qin Baijun go in the end, an uncontrollable, terrifying killing intent directly enveloped the brawny man. Now, you actually dare to use that shameless woman who has disgraced the royal family to threaten me. It seems that I have no choice but to kill you. Yu Haoran, shut up. Even though he was locked onto by Yu Haoran's terrifying killing intent, the brawny man still shouted angrily. The Empress Dowager is still a close elder of my Liu family. I absolutely cannot tolerate you ruining the reputation of a close elder like this. Chapter 880. Peach Blossom Town. The moment the burly man took out the purple jade pendant, the murderous aura that had locked onto him was immediately shattered by an invisible force. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran withdrew the terrifying murderous aura that had been triggered by his anger. Then, he withdrew the secret transformation technique and changed back to his original appearance. Then, he looked at the purple jade pendant in the burly man's hand with a solemn expression. Fouling, looks like I can only use the power of law with the scars of time. Got it. After receiving Yu Haoran's reminder, Fouling immediately used the possession technique. Yu Haoran, kneel down and apologize. Seeing Yu Haoran withdraw the secret transformation technique and change back to his original appearance, the burly man holding up the purple jade pendant immediately humiliated him proudly. If that be Asterisk TCH's real body came with an Emperor-level sword, I would definitely hide as far away as possible. As Fouling's possession technique came to an end, Yu Haoran, who had regained control of the situation, took the initiative to provoke the burly man as he stretched out his hand and pointed at the purple jade pendant. Bang! The chi force condensed by the spiritual energy directly shattered the purple jade pendant. A mere doppelganger condensed by a trace of spiritual energy does not have the strength to make me. Yu Haoran, submit. Yu Haoran said contemptuously as he looked at the purple figure that was gradually condensing from the shattered purple jade pendant. It's you. When the purple-clothed woman, whose body had been condensed by a trace of spiritual energy, saw Yu Haoran standing on the branch of the peach tree in front of her, she immediately screamed with a frosty expression. Her screams pierced the clouds and immediately alerted the experts and powerhouses in Peach Blossom Town who had come to watch the battle. The doppelganger condensed by the spiritual energy has the strength of a quasi-martial venerable expert with the complete mastery of the law. In a pavilion in a courtyard in the east of Peach Blossom Town, a middle-aged man of about 40 years old with a dignified appearance and dressed in a long green robe spoke with a solemn expression. It looks like the purple-clothed woman's real body is at least a second tribulation quasi-martial venerable expert who has passed the body tribulation and the mind tribulation. Uncle Gene, can you defeat this purple-clothed woman? An effeminate youth of about 20 years old standing in the pavilion asked with a worried expression. If that woman's real body were here, of course, I would stay as far away as possible. But it's just a clone condensed from a strand of divine sense. Hee. Although the middle-aged man in the green robe didn't continue speaking, his cold chuckle made the young people in the pavilion relax. Zi Xian, the most respected Empress Dowager of the Emperor Qin Kingdom. Why would her divine sense avatar appear here? In a pavilion in a courtyard in the northern district of Peach Blossom Town, a beautiful woman in her 30s with a charming appearance and a hot figure frowned as she muttered to herself. Could it be that she also knows about the secret realm in the Hungduan Mountains? Aunt Lee, could it be that you know that purple-clothed woman? In the pavilion, a young girl who was about 18 or 19 years old and had an angelic face and a devilish figure raised her head and asked the beautiful woman who had just stood up, "I don't know her." The beautiful woman shook her head and said with a serious expression, "But I've heard of this woman's name more than once. She can be said to be one of the most outstanding evildoers of our era. It's just that after she got married, I rarely heard about her. But I didn't expect her cultivation to progress so quickly and her strength to be so strong." "Bitch, are you surprised or pleasantly surprised to see me, the prince consort?" In the face of the purple-clothed woman's shriek, Yu Haoran manipulated the law of time and sneered at her. "Damn brat." After hearing Yu Haoran's sneer, the purple-clothed woman was so angry that her long hair fluttered in the wind. Her voice was as cold as frost as she gritted her teeth. "Back then, I spared your life because of His Majesty. I didn't want to disappoint and anger His Majesty. Now, without His Majesty's protection, you won't be able to escape. Bitch, back then, when you had the Emperor Realm Sword, no one was your match." In the face of the purple-clothed woman's murderous threat, Yu Haoran, who was slowly flying away from the peach tree, did not want to be outdone. "Now, you don't have the strength of a second tribulation quasi-martial honorable, and you don't have the protection of the Emperor Realm Sword. You're the one who can escape. You think you can?" The purple-clothed woman looked at Yu Haoran with disdain and mocked him. "Even if I stand here and don't move, you won't be able to hurt me." Yu Haoran stopped about 3 meters away from the purple-clothed woman. He raised his arm and asked with a cold smile, "Is that so?" Then, he raised his finger and pointed at the purple-clothed woman. "Marks of time." "Impossible." Just as Yu Haoran's law of time left his finger, the purple-clothed woman cried out in horror. "You're just at the peak of the 8th grade Martial King realm. How could you have comprehended 4 layers of the law of time?" The purple-clothed woman's cry alarmed countless experts of the martial sage realm in the entire Peach Blossom Town. These experts left the place and appeared about 100 meters away from Yu Haoran and the purple-clothed woman. They looked at Yu Haoran seriously and looked at the finger he had just stretched out. Soul transfer. As a second tribulation quasi-martial honorable expert, the purple-clothed woman's state of mind was extremely strong. She instantly stabilized her state of absent-mindedness. When the law of time got close to her, she immediately used the demon path secret method and transferred her divine thought to the burly man. And Ziyu, the burly man was instantly locked on by the purple-clothed woman's divine thought. How could he not know what she wanted to do? In a panic, he wanted to ask a few questions. However, the law of time that had been transferred to his body broke down into countless pieces and began to evolve his life experience. Sizzle. Looking at the burly man being broken down into countless pieces and evolving from birth to death, the dozens of experts of the martial sage realm at the scene gasped. They all subconsciously stepped back and looked at Yu Haoran in horror. "Fouling, what's going on?" Looking at the purple-clothed woman who had successfully used the demon path secret method soul transfer to transfer the law of time's attack, Yu Haoran immediately asked with a gloomy face. Although the soul transfer was a demon path secret method, it was very useful and could be used to save lives at critical moments. Therefore, the alliance of the righteous sects in the Tianxian continent did not restrict the cultivation of the soul transfer secret method. In other words, the 2 ancestors of the Wang family and dozens of experts of the 9th grade martial sage realm that he had killed before were also proficient in the soul transfer secret method. When facing the law of time that he had used, they didn't use it because it was useless. Then, why was the purple-clothed woman able to use it successfully? The reason is very simple. Facing Yu Haoran's question, Fouling quickly explained. Chapter 881. Peach Blossom Town. Through the boundless knowledge sea, Thowling looked at Howren, whose expression was gradually easing. He opened his mouth, but in the end he sighed softly and said nothing. In truth, the reason why the purple-clothed woman was able to successfully divert the Law of Time Scar's attack was because, aside from the fact that her divine sense had condensed into a body, it was also because of her special physique and the power of law she had comprehended, which could weaken the attack power of the Scars of Time law. Otherwise, how could an attack formed by 4 layers of Law of Time be so easily neutralized? After hearing Thowling's explanation, Howren's gloomy expression gradually eased. However, when he thought about how he could deal with the purple-clothed woman, it seemed that the only way he could deal with her was to use the Law of Time Scars. Therefore, he needed to confirm whether she could continuously use the soul transfer secret technique. If she could, then he could only turn around and leave. Even if it was just a body condensed from her divine sense, with the sufficient energy left in the jade pendant, the purple-clothed woman could exert the Law of Time's quasi-martial venerable realm. If she couldn't, then he would continue to use the Law of Time Scars and strive to destroy her in the shortest time possible. Howren, it's not like you haven't cultivated the soul transfer secret technique before. After hearing Howren's question, Thowling immediately said in a tone of disappointment. The reason why the woman could instantly transfer her divine sense was because that guy surnamed Lu wore the purple jade pendant all year round. His body was tainted with her aura, which allowed her to successfully use the soul transfer secret technique. If the soul transfer secret technique could be used casually, they would definitely have a place in the top 10 secret techniques of the Devil Path. Then it's easy. Howren was actually very clear about Thowling's explanation of the soul transfer secret technique. However, he was shocked by the purple-clothed woman's soul transfer secret technique and wanted to get confirmation from Thowling. He raised his arm again and pointed his finger at the purple-clothed woman. Howren, wait, I have something to say. Seeing Howren raise his arm again and intend to continue using the Law of Time Scars, the purple-clothed woman immediately screamed to stop him. Speak. Retracting his finger, Howren coldly said. Howren, what kind of hero are you if you use a borrowed law? After receiving Howren's signal, the purple-clothed woman immediately said provocatively, if you're still a man, then dispel the secret technique you just used and defeat me with your own abilities. Hee. After hearing the purple-clothed woman's self-righteous provocation, Howren didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You are an old woman over 100 years old, yet you are already a quasi-martial revered expert. You want to fight me, a young man who has only cultivated for a little more than a year, and is only an 8th grade martial king? At this point, Howren suddenly asked in a loud voice, Bitch, are you stupid, or am I stupid? Damn brat, I'm not an old woman. I'm only in my 40s this year. For women, especially beautiful women, age was always an untouchable topic. Howren had just said that she was an old woman over 100 years old, which was equivalent to asking for her life. Therefore, the purple-clothed woman was so angry that her hair fluttered and her face was as cold as ice. However, when she saw Howren extend the finger that he had just retracted, the purple-clothed woman immediately suppressed the anger that surged in her heart. As a second tribulation, quasi-martial revered expert, even if she lost a trace of her divine sense, it wouldn't affect her body too much. However, Howren's Law of Time Scars could not only disintegrate the body, it could also use the divine sense to simulate a person's life experience. For the purple-clothed woman, she had too many secrets in her life that she couldn't tell anyone. If the Law of Time Scars were to display them, not only would she have to hide in the deep mountains and forests forever, but it would also be a fatal blow to the Emperor Qin Kingdom's royal family and the foundation of the Emperor Qin Kingdom. If her divine sense hadn't been locked down by Howren's Law of Time, she would have even thought of self-destructing her divine sense. Howren, it's my fault that I didn't make it clear just now. The purple-clothed woman took a deep breath to readjust her emotions and spoke in an indifferent tone. In our duel, I will seal my own power and maintain the same level as you. Not only do you have to disperse the secret technique that allows you to use the law of time, but you also can't use the secret technique that allows you to transform into a strange beast. You can only rely on your own strength. I don't believe you. Howren hadn't thought of killing her through a duel since it was temporarily difficult for them to fight. Therefore, he used the excuse that he didn't believe in her character to reject her suggestion for a duel. And I swear on the law of heaven. Howren's excuse for rejecting her almost made the purple-clothed woman lose control of her emotions again. Fortunately, Howren kept raising his arm, which made her immediately calm down. She even said the reason that made it impossible for him to continue rejecting her. Howren agreed to her request. Just as Howren was considering how to find an excuse to continue rejecting her request for a duel, Thaling suddenly instructed in his sea of consciousness. Thaling, you know my current state. It's not good for me to get entangled with my opponent for too long. Otherwise, the tyrannical emotions that have regained the upper hand will not only delay the training in the mystic realm in 6 days, but also affect the sacrificial refining of my natal sword. Howren immediately retorted after hearing Thaling's instructions. Howren, I want you to agree to her request for a duel, not only to eliminate the tyrannical emotions in your body, but also to refine your natal sword better and faster. At this point, Thaling reached out to the top of Victor's body and sucked. Immediately after, a sharp sword that emitted a faint purple light appeared in his hand. Howren, actually half a month ago, I had already successfully refined your natal sword. The reason why I didn't give it to you was because I lacked the best opportunity to refine it. Because the natal sword that I refined was not only mixed with your own blood essence, but also integrated with the strong, murderous aura that you formed through killing. Howren, take this. At this point, Thaling suddenly reached out and threw the natal sword in his hand. The natal sword directly penetrated the sea of consciousness and appeared in Howren's hand. Just as the natal sword entered his hand, a feeling of blood connection immediately surged in his heart. However, in addition to the feeling of blood connection, Howren also clearly felt an unwillingness to resist. Howren, the combination of blood essence and strong murderous aura allowed the natal sword to have the opportunity to develop intelligence in advance. If you want to successfully refine your natal sword, you need to obtain its approval. Seeing that Howren had already felt the unwillingness to resist in his natal sword, Thaling continued to remind him. In front of you, the purple-clothed woman who is willing to seal her cultivation and challenge you at the peak of 8th grade Martial King is the best opportunity to make your natal sword's instincts completely submit and make it willingly follow you in the future. Chapter 882. Peach Blossom Town. After hearing Thaling's detailed explanation, Howren, who was holding his natal sword tightly, slowly closed his eyes. I, Howren, swear by the rules of heaven that in the following competition with Zixien, I will not use the law of time scars, nor will I use the secret technique of transformation. When he opened his eyes again, he suddenly raised the natal sword in his hand and swore loudly. If I violate the oath, the rules of heaven will backfire and my divine soul will be destroyed. After hearing Howren swear by the rules of heaven, the purple-clothed woman's face immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. As long as Howren did not use the power of the rules of heaven that could evolve his life experience, then she had nothing to fear. Moreover, she also believed that with her strength, she could easily kill the bastard in front of her who had humiliated her several times. Therefore, the purple-clothed woman immediately raised her left hand and swore to the rules of heaven. I, Zixien, swear by the rules of heaven that in the following competition with Howren, I will seal my cultivation and divine soul and compete with him at the same level. If I violate the oath, the rules of heaven will backfire and my divine soul will be destroyed. After swearing to the rules of heaven, the purple-clothed woman wanted to use her divine sense to seal herself, but a cold reply suddenly came from a void. Aloud, accompanied by the cold reply, a yin-yang pattern imprint quickly merged into Zixian's body. Then, her cultivation quickly fell from the quasi-martial honorable realm to the peak of the 8th grade martial king realm. What made Zixian even more alarmed was that a yin-yang pattern imprint also appeared in her body that was tens of thousands of miles away. Although the imprint of the yin-yang pattern did not seal her body's cultivation base, it still froze her soul. In other words, in the following competition, if she violated the oath, not only would her divine sense be destroyed, even her body would suffer a calamity. The competition between Yu Haoran and Zixian could actually attract the intervention of the rules of heaven. Everyone's gaze immediately turned to Yu Haoran. They wanted to see what was so special about this delicate-looking young man that he could attract the attention of the heavenly Tao. At the back of the crowd, Dongfang Ting bit her lips as she looked at Yu Haoran, her eyes filled with regret. Just a moment ago, she had learned about Yu Haoran's true methods from the conversation of several experts from the great Emperor Qin Kingdom. The peak Grandmaster of the Pill Dao was able to cross ranks to refine the Pill of 5 Lives and the Ice Heart J-Bone Pill that could help a quasi-martial honorable realm cultivator cross tribulation. Could also refine the rank Nirvana Pill that could be reborn, rebirth pill. At the pinnacle of Formation Grandmaster Realm, he could use chess pieces to set up the long-lost 36 Dipper Formation. Dongfang Xian's Heavens. In the Heaven Palace, asking heavens was asking for Xian, asking for help. Help? Was asking for help was asking for Dongfang. If Dongfang Ting's heart was filled with regret, there were 2 people in the crowd who were feeling extremely depressed. They were Gu Yangzi and Gu Quan, who should have been the main characters, who should have been praised and discussed by the crowd and continue to spread their fame. Gu Quan was better off. After all, as a lone cultivator, he did not care much about fame. However, it was different for Gu Liangzi. As the most outstanding member of a younger generation in the Gu Liang family, he knew very well how important fame was to a person. The higher one's fame was, the stronger one's providence was. The stronger one's providence was, the faster one could break through their cultivation and the better one could comprehend the power of the laws. Furthermore, the strength of one's providence was directly related to one's luck. Those with strong providence could turn misfortune into blessings. They could go out and meet noble people. They could also go out and pick up treasures. It was precisely because providence was related to too many things that Gu Yangzi took the initiative to challenge Gu Quan. He hoped that through the competition with Gu Quan, he could test the results of his cultivation during this period of time and also gain a huge amount of providence. However, the competition between Yu Haoran and Zixian was actually able to attract the intervention of the heavenly law. This alone had already given Yu Haoran an unimaginable reputation. Let's begin. Yu Haoran, who was holding his natal sword tightly, waved his sword and signaled to Zixian, who had a gloomy expression on her face. Yudi, the intervention of the heavenly law made Zixian know that she absolutely could not fail. Therefore, she chose to attack without any warning. Furthermore, she used the heaven-level palm technique that she was proficient in. Jade-like hands that were like fine rain slapped fiercely from all directions. Every palm was a real palm, and the power of every palm exceeded that of a martial emperor. Facing the countless jade-like hands that were like fine rain, Yu Haoran did not panic at all. He channeled his soul power and origin energy into his natal sword. Then, he gently waved at the jade-like hands that filled the sky. Overflowing water. Following Yu Haoran's soft shout, an indescribable sword chi shot out from his natal sword. Then, it instantly split into countless sword chi. Every sword chi accurately shattered the jade-like hands that were slapping at him. This is the concept of a sword technique. After seeing the trace of a mysterious aura that was revealed in Yu Haoran's overflowing water sword technique, a sword cultivator at the scene cried out in shock. Senior Zhao, are you sure that the sword technique just now contained a concept? Hearing the sword cultivator cry out that Yu Haoran's sword technique contained a concept, Gu Yongzi was unconvinced and questioned. The fact that the rules of heaven were able to intervene in the competition had already greatly improved Yu Haoran's reputation. If he could still use a sword technique with a concept that could challenge those of a higher level, then the effect of the competition that he had carefully planned for more than 2 months would probably be greatly reduced. Young Master Z, 30 years ago, when I was ambushed by my enemies, the pressure of the life-or-death situation allowed me to accidentally comprehend the concept of a sword technique. From then on, I kill my enemies. In the face of Gu Liangzi's doubts, although the sword cultivator's attitude was relatively respectful, there was a trace of anger in his rebuttal. Do you think that I misjudged the concept contained in the sword technique that young Master Haoran just used? In the face of the sword cultivator's rebuttal, Gu Yongzi smiled and apologized. Then, he raised his head and continued to watch Yu Haoran fight. However, a faint killing intent emerged in his heart. Sword technique concept. Seeing Yu Haoran use the concept of a sword technique to easily break her heaven-level palm technique, Zixuan praised with a dignified expression. I didn't expect that at such a young age, you could actually feel the concept of sword technique. It seems that I have underestimated you. Senior, you flatter me. In the face of Zixuan's praise, Yu Haoran, who was immersed in the battle, recovered his elegant and violent character from his previous life. His attitude was relatively calm as he replied, "Next, Senior, please continue to test this sword technique that also contains the concept of sword technique. It's hard to stop." Chapter 883. Peach Blossom Town. Wind Butterfly. After feeling the heroic aura of the hard-to-withdraw sword technique, Zixuan took a step forward with a solemn expression. As she quickly struck out with her palm, she also shouted softly. Along with Zixuan's soft shout, a jade hand that crossed space directly appeared in front of the heroic sword chi. When it successfully dispersed the sword chi, the jade hand was also shattered by the sword chi. Senior, you are testing this junior sword technique that also contains the same concept. Yu Haoran did not care about the heroic sword chi formed by Zixuan, easily dispersed the hard-to-withdraw sword technique. As he took a step forward, he directly performed the third move of the sword technique. Spilled water can't be taken back. The sword chi that shot out from the natal sword, like the wind butterfly palm technique that Zixuan had just performed, directly crossed the limit of space and instantly appeared above her head. At the same time, the heroic and fierce sword chi instantly split into countless fierce sword chi and pierced towards Zixuan like a storm. Wind and rain butterflies. Facing the fierce sword chi that surrounded her from all directions, Zixuan shouted softly and also performed the overlapping palm technique. Countless jade palms successfully dispersed the countless sword chi. Sizzle. Although the two of them had only exchanged 3 moves, no matter if it was Zixuan, who had used a palm technique, or Yu Haoran, who had used a sword technique, both of them had displayed a deep understanding of martial skills. Moreover, both of them had grasped the true essence of palm techniques and sword techniques. Especially the third move formed by the overlapping of the first 2 moves, its power increased by nearly 10 times. This also made everyone present gasp. Compared to the shock of the crowd, Gu Yongzi was shocked, and the killing intent that emerged in his heart was constantly increasing. With the cultivation of a mere peak 8th grade martial king, not only had he grasped the concept of the sword technique, but his understanding of sword technique and martial arts had also far surpassed him, a genius of the younger generation of the inherited family. At this moment, Yu Haoran's performance had clearly surpassed his and Gu Quan's. Gu Quan. When he thought of Gu Quan, Gu Yongzi immediately turned his head to look at him, and then a happy smile appeared on his face. As a lone cultivator, the reason Gu Quan was able to make a name for himself that wasn't inferior to his own was because of his character that dared to fight and kill, and also because he liked to go around challenging geniuses that possessed peerless and monstrous potential. Now, Gu Quan's eyes were filled with a strong fighting spirit. It meant that no matter what the final result of the competition was, Gu Quan would challenge the winner. If the winner was Zi Xian, then he would take the initiative to compete with Gu Quan. If the winner was Yu Haoran, then he would let Gu Quan defeat him first, and then he would defeat Gu Quan. The effect of doing this was far greater than if he were to compete with Gu Quan alone. Thinking of his plan to kill two birds with one stone, the smile on Gu Liangzi's face became even brighter. When Yu Haoran saw that Zi Xian had easily neutralized the sword technique he had practiced meticulously in his previous life, his calm expression became slightly more solemn. Overflowing water, difficult to retrieve, as well as the superimposed, overflowing water. These three sword techniques were self-created by him with the help of a large number of sword techniques and martial skills obtained from historical remains and forbidden grounds in his previous life. Although Zi Xian had neutralized them easily, in reality, the power of each sword technique had already reached the peak of third-grade martial emperor. The superimposed, overflowing water not only reached the peak of fourth-grade martial emperor, but was also difficult to block and could only passively defend. Of course, the sword techniques he had mastered in his previous life were definitely not limited to the three sword techniques he had created himself. However, many of the sword techniques he had mastered in his previous life required the use of poison to be perfectly executed, and only then could he unleash the power of the sword technique. After his rebirth, he had already abandoned the practice of poison and could no longer continue to use most of the sword techniques he had mastered in his previous life. In desperation, he decided to imitate and use the heaven-destroying sword technique that the heaven-destroying demon Venerable had passed down to him, hoping to create a sword technique that was more powerful than overflowing water. Taking 3 steps back, his consciousness quickly recalled the heaven-destroying sword technique that he had inherited. Then, with the understanding of many sword techniques from his previous life, he gradually understood a bit of the heaven-destroying sword technique. Using the understanding of the heaven-destroying sword technique and then combining it with his own cultivation and experience, a sword technique that wasn't very mature gradually took shape. Senior, I am impressed by your strength. Although the self-created sword technique was not very mature, it could only be perfected through continuous testing. Therefore, after Yu Haoran praised Zi Xian, he immediately channeled all his energy into his natal sword. Now, I have just created a sword technique. I hope you can help me check it out. If it had been before the competition and they had heard Yu Haoran say that he had created a sword technique, whether it was Zi Xian or the people present, they would have mocked and ridiculed him. But now, not only did the people present not mock and ridicule him, but they all looked at him. They wanted to see the power of Yu Haoran's self-created sword technique, as well as its subtleties. Zi Xian's eyes flashed with a trace of amazement. While she raised her guard, she also immediately used her strongest defensive technique, sword pursuit. As Yu Haoran shouted the sword technique that had just been given a name, the natal sword in his hand immediately left his hand and turned into a bolt of lightning that shot towards Zi Xian. The natal sword that contained all of Yu Haoran's energy had reached the level of a 5th-grade martial royal. This caused Zi Xian to immediately use a defensive palm technique to block the attack of the natal sword. But just as the defensive palm technique collided with the natal sword, to everyone's surprise, the natal sword suddenly shot out a sharp sword chi when it attacked the palm technique. The sharp sword chi, whose power was close to that of a 5th-grade martial royal, directly penetrated the blockade of the defensive palm technique. Before Zi Xian could do anything to defend herself, it directly shot into her heart. Looking at her heart that had been penetrated by the sharp sword chi, Zi Xian's face showed a trace of admiration, a trace of relief, a trace of unwillingness, and a trace of worry. Then, she looked up at Yu Haoran and asked in a tone full of expectation, "Yu Haoran, can you let him live in the future? What do you think?" Yu Haoran asked indifferently as he took back the natal sword that had broken the jade-shattering palm's defense. Alas! After hearing Yu Haoran's indifferent question, Zixian couldn't help but sigh softly, and then the body condensed by divine thoughts exploded in an instant. Just as the body condensed by divine thoughts exploded, in the Qin Kingdom's imperial palace tens of thousands of miles away, Zixian's body, who had confined herself, got up and walked to the courtyard. Looking up to the south, she whispered to herself, "By June, if you are smart enough, you'd better stay in the southern region for the rest of your life and never see Yu Haoran for the rest of your life. Otherwise, you and I will be separated forever." Seeing the body condensed by Zixian's divine thoughts explode, Yu Haoran couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then he turned and went straight to the peach tree where he had just landed, intending to take the opportunity to refine the natal sword in his hand. Chapter 884. Peach Blossom Town. Gu Quan, who stood in front of Yu Haoran in a flash, introduced himself with his eyes shining with a strong fighting spirit. Gu Quan. "Gu Quan, I'm not in the mood to accept your challenge right now. Get out of my way immediately." Frowning slightly, Yu Haoran suppressed the displeasure in his heart and refused. Relying on his self-created sword technique to kill Zixuan, he finally obtained the recognition of his natal sword. It was the best opportunity to use the sacrificial refining method to refine his natal sword. How could he have the leisure and time to refine his natal sword with Gu Quan? Fight! In the face of Yu Haoran's refusal, Gu Quan directly pulled out the long saber on his back. If he didn't accept the challenge, he would take the initiative to attack. "Gu Quan, considering that you are a rogue cultivator, it's not easy for you to have your current cultivation and reputation. I advise you to quickly retreat." The displeasure in his heart was instantly replaced by anger, but Yu Haoran still tried to suppress his anger and advised, "Fight!" Taking a step forward, Gu Quan roared as a strong, murderous aura rose from his body. Gu Quan, as the saying goes, some things can be done once or twice, but not thrice. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran put away his natal sword and threatened with a cold expression. "Now that you have successfully angered me, you should be prepared to die." Slowly raising his arm and pointing his finger at Gu Quan, Yu Haoran was ready to use the secret technique of time. "Brother Yu, I just wanted to challenge you. I didn't want to offend you." Seeing Yu Haoran pointing his finger at him, Gu Quan hurriedly took a dozen steps back and explained with a slightly panicked tone, "I've already said that I'm not in the mood to accept your challenge right now." Ignoring Gu Quan's explanation, Yu Haoran said coldly, "It's you who provoke me again and again. You asked for death. Brother Yu, it's Gu Quan's fault. Gu Quan apologizes to you." Gu Quan could feel the suppressed anger in Yu Haoran's cold tone. He knew that his untactful, continuous challenges had caused the other party to want to kill him. Even Zixuan, who was a quasi-martial venerable, was afraid of the law of time scars. Then, how could he, a mere ninth-grade martial emperor, be a match for the law of time scars? Therefore, in order to eliminate the anger in Yu Haoran's heart, and also to save his own life, Gu Quan hurriedly apologized. "Gu Quan, if you really want to challenge me, then let's have a showdown in the Hidden Dragon battle 11 months from now." In fact, Gu Quan's nature was not bad. He just liked to challenge different experts to improve his cultivation and strength, and also to increase his reputation and influence. It was precisely because of his personality that he offended the experts of the Yushu Temple. As a result, he was hunted down by the experts of the Yushu Temple for more than 30 years in his previous life. However, his outstanding potential and tenacity had not only allowed him to survive the pursuit of the experts of the Jade Illusory Palace, he had even borrowed the immense pressure from the pursuit to successfully ascend to the peak of the 9th-grade martial saint realm. In the end, the experts of the Yushu Temple had no choice but to postpone the order to kill him. Thaling's plea and terrifying background made it difficult for him to offend the Yushu Temple in the short term. Therefore, it was not a bad choice to leave an opponent who could cause headaches for the Yushu Temple in the future. This was also the main reason why Yu Haoran tolerated Gu Quan. Otherwise, with his vengeful personality, he would have used the law of time scars to kill Gu Quan. Okay, since he took the initiative to challenge him, It meant that Yu Haoran had forgiven him. Gu Quan, who secretly let out a sigh of relief, loudly agreed to Yu Haoran's invitation. Then, it looked at Gu Yongzi. The strong desire to fight that had just disappeared reappeared in his eyes. Brother Gu, the current atmosphere is no longer suitable for you and me to continue the competition. Seeing Gu Quan's challenging gaze, Gu Yongzi had no choice but to walk out with a gloomy face and reject the competition that had already been agreed upon. Why don't we also postpone our competition to the Hidden Dragon battle 11 months from now? Rejecting and postponing the competition was something that he had no choice but to do. With the interference of the law of heaven, a peak 8th grade martial king was able to grasp the will of the sword, which was far superior to his own understanding of the sword, as well as the sword that he created on the spot to kill Zixian. Yu Haoran's stunning performance just now had given him a lot of prestige, but at the same time, it had also made the competition between him and Gu Quan lose its meaning. Since it had already lost its meaning, why should he continue to waste time and energy on the competition? Okay, different from the straightforwardly accepting Yu Haoran's challenge, Gu Quan reluctantly agreed to Gu Yongzi's suggestion of postponing the competition to the Hidden Dragon battle. Brother Yu, I'll see you in the Hidden Dragon City 11 months from now, Gu Quan said as he slammed his fist on his chest. Brother Gu, I won't see you off, Yu Haoran replied politely as he nodded his head. After Gu Quan left Peach Blossom Town, Yu Haoran took out his natal sword and continued to fly toward the peach blossom tree that he had just landed on. Gu Yongzi, whose face had turned ashen due to Gu Quan's contempt, suddenly issued a challenge loudly. Brother Yu, your unique understanding of the sword, as well as your determination to fight without fear of the pressure of the strong, has made Z admire you greatly. How about you and I have a competition to improve our understanding of the sword? Do you want to die? Yu Haoran coldly looked at Gu Yongzi as he asked with a gloomy face. He had treated Gu Quan kindly because, in the near future, he would have a conflict with the strong people of the Yushu Temple. He would then become a thorn in the side of the Yushu Temple for the next 30 years. This could be considered as attracting the attention of the strong people of the Yushu Temple. However, Gu Yongzi was not only a narrow-minded and insidious person, but also a flatterer who wanted to curry favor with the powerful. In the face of his provocation, Yu Haoran would not give him any face. Yu Haoran's sudden outburst caused Gu Yongzi's forced smile to be replaced by anger. What about you? Do you believe that I will kill you right now? Yu Haoran, who was emitting a strong, murderous aura, directly signaled to Thaling to use the possession technique, intending to take advantage of the opportunity to kill Gu Yongzi. Yu Haoran, there's a martial venerable who has passed the body tribulation 10,000 meters above the void. However, in the face of his signal, Thaling refused to use the possession technique and reminded him with a serious expression. That martial venerable expert has already locked onto you in advance. As long as you use the law of time scars to deal with Gu Yongzi, that expert will immediately attack you. It's just a competition between the younger generation, but they sent a martial venerable who has passed the body tribulation realm. It really fits the despicable style of the Gu Yang family. After hearing Thaling's reminder, Yu Haoran suppressed his murderous aura toward Gu Yongzi and commented with a cold smile. Chapter 885. Peach Blossom Town. Yu Haoran spat viciously as he looked up at the cloudless sky. Now, immediately, take Gu Yongzi and leave Peach Blossom Town. Otherwise, I'll leave you behind as well. Yu Haoran raised his head to face the threat in the sky. The people who had yet to leave immediately looked up at the sky. However, other than a few experts who had used special secret techniques to hide their true strength and sneered contemptuously, most of the remaining experts did not discover the expert hiding in the sky. After waiting for nearly 30 seconds and seeing that there was no movement in the sky, Yu Haoran raised his arm and pointed it at the position where the quasi-martial venerable expert was hiding according to the Thaling's reminder. His tone was full of confidence as he reminded him. Everyone who knows about my, Howren's experience should know that the law of time scars that I use as secret technique can ignore the restrictions of time and space and directly attack the target locked on by the law. If you have the confidence to withstand the power of the law of time scars and are willing to play out your life experience, then it's best to hide there and not move. Then, Howren stretched out his finger and pointed at the position where the quasi-martial venerable expert was hiding as he shouted softly, "The law of time scars." Just as Howren said the word time, a middle-aged expert in black rushed down from the sky. The middle-aged expert in black was as fast as lightning and instantly appeared beside Gu Yangzi. Just as Howren said the words "the law of time," he immediately disappeared from Peach Blossom Town with Gu Yangzi. "Coward!" Howren would put down his arm again, mocked disdainfully. When the people present heard Howren's disdainful mockery and saw that there were no fluctuations of the law of time's power in the surroundings, they immediately knew that the quasi-martial venerable expert hiding in the sky had been ruthlessly played. Most of the experts present couldn't help but burst out in laughter. Although they had quickly escaped from Peach Blossom Town, the quasi-martial venerable expert who had passed the body calamity had been using his divine consciousness to observe the situation behind him. When he realized that he had been played by Howren, he couldn't help but roar at the sky in anger. "Junior, I'm going to kill you." Although he was roaring, the quasi-martial venerable of the Guliang clan did not return to Peach Blossom Town. Instead, he unleashed an even faster and stronger power to leave. Howren, your provocation and teasing just now were too risky." The tower spirit could not help but criticize Howren, who had a smug smile on his face, as it knew the strength of a quasi-martial saint who had passed the body tribulation. "If by any chance that quasi-martial honorable is enraged and turns around to kill you, unless I control your body, you can only turn around and run for your life. If that's the case, the fame you gain by defeating Zixien will be greatly reduced. It will also increase the difficulty of refining the natal sword. Thaling, don't worry. What I did just now was not risky." In the face of Thaling's criticism, Howren, who had returned to the peach blossom tree branch where he had just landed, smiled and comforted him. "Because I know the nature of the Gu Liang clan very well. I know that this clan is suspicious and cautious. Therefore, no matter how angry they are in their hearts, they will definitely not dare to return to Peach Blossom Town to cause trouble for me." After comforting him, Howren placed the natal sword that he had just taken out between his legs and closed his eyes to begin refining the natal sword. Seeing Howren's action of refining the natal sword, the crowd finally understood why he had refused to accept Gu Quan and Gu Yangzi's challenge. He had refused to accept it not because he was afraid, but because he had more important things to do. Therefore, the crowd did not disturb Howren. Then, regardless of whether he had seen it or not, they all cupped their hands and left the scene. Only the three young men behind the middle-aged man in long green robes had jealousy and hatred in their eyes. Looking at Howren, who was sitting cross-legged on the branch, Dongfang Ting thought for a while. Finally, she gritted her teeth and turned around to leave Peach Blossom Town. The Hengduan mountain range was located 1,300 miles east of Guangling City. It was made up of 36 strangely shaped mountain peaks. Within the mountain range, the terrain was dangerous, strange beasts ran rampant, and there were many natural treasures. It was a paradise that many adventurers loved to train in. The Hengduan mountain range is indeed a paradise for adventurers. Howren could not help but exclaim as he looked at a level 5, grade 7 fire rock flame with its petals blooming 10 meters away. It had only been 3 hours since he entered the Hengduan mountain range, but he had already discovered 3 level 5 and 9 level 6 spiritual herbs, fruits, and flowers. Howren, the Hengduan mountain range is not large. With my divine telekinesis, I can easily cover the entire area. However, until now, I have not found any clues about the secret realm. Unlike Howren, who was focused on the natural treasures that grew in the Hengduan mountain range, Thowling had been using his strongest divine telekinesis to search for the exact location of the secret realm since entering the mountain range 3 hours ago. After all, the secret realm in the Hungduan mountain range was one of their most important training targets after leaving the great Emperor Qin Kingdom. However, after spending a total of 3 hours and changing 7 different positions in the process, they still hadn't found anything. This made the tower genie, who had always been very patient, couldn't help but feel a little irritated and questioned. Are you sure that the information you received in your previous life is not wrong? Thowling, in my previous life, when I learned that the secret realm in the Hungduan mountain range had opened, I accidentally learned about it 20 years after the secret realm closed. It has been such a long time. Perhaps the people who told the rumors of the secret realm back then might have remembered wrongly when the secret realm actually opened. Sensing the irritation in Thowling's questioning tone, Yu Haoran explained with an indifferent attitude. Furthermore, even if we missed the opportunity to open the secret realm, the natural treasures in the Hungduan mountain range and the natural treasures in the Hungduan mountain range, where exotic beasts roam freely, are enough to achieve the effects of my training. Yu Haoran's indifferent attitude left Thowling at a loss for words. In the end, he could only sigh and spread out his divine telekinesis to continue searching for the whereabouts of the secret realm. The rank 5 third-grade fire rock flower could be used to refine a fire god pill that could directly increase one's fire attribute cultivation base. Although he did not have a fire attribute physique, according to the principle of mutual promotion and suppression of the 5 elements, what could be used to ignite fire. Therefore, the fire god pill would also have a very significant effect on him. With a thought, the natal sword instantly appeared in his hand. Yu Haoran held the natal sword tightly as he spread out his divine telekinesis to search for the fire rock flower's guardian beast. Found it! I found it! Chapter 886. In the Hungduan mountain range. Thowling, you found the exact location of the secret realm. Yu Haoran, what did you find? Yu Haoran and Thowling asked at the same time. As a junior, Yu Haoran did not wait for Thowling to take the initiative and replied, Thowling, I just found the location of the fire rock flower guardian beast. Yu Haoran, what are you thinking? Thowling could not help but ask angrily when he saw Yu Haoran's thoughts were not on the secret realm. Do you still want the enlightenment stone in the secret realm? Do you still want the wood dragon ginseng in the secret realm? Do you still want the soul spiritual fruit in the secret realm? When Yu Haoran saw that Thowling was really angry, he quickly comforted him with a smile. Don't be angry, Thowling. Don't we have you to deal with everything? Oomph. Thowling snorted unhappily in the face of Yu Haoran's apology. He did not want to talk to him at all. Thowling, you know that my divine thought can only extend to a maximum of 30 miles. Yu Haoran could only continue to persuade Thowling when he saw that his anger had not subsided. Let's not talk about whether it's useful with such a short distance. If you attract the attention of the refined Saint Stage exotic beasts in a mountain range, you'll have to perform the possession technique. Won't that affect your search for the secret realm? That's why I can't just wait for your news. I can only find something for myself to do. At least your explanation makes sense. After hearing Yu Haoran's persuasion, the anger in Thowling's heart eased a lot. He no longer blamed Yu Haoran for not paying attention to the secret realm earlier. Thowling, what did you discover earlier? When Yu Haoran saw that Thowling had finally calmed down, he secretly sighed in relief and quickly asked him about his discovery earlier. Yu Haoran, do you remember when you were sparring with Zi Xian? There was a middle-aged man in green robes with a dignified appearance in the crowd. He was in his 40s. Thowling did not immediately explain his discovery. Instead, he suddenly asked a question that puzzled Yu Haoran. Yes, there were 3 young men in their 20s with him. Although Yu Haoran did not understand why Thowling suddenly changed the topic, after more than a year of interaction, he knew there must be a reason for him to ask such a question, so he nodded and replied. In fact, the reason why he noticed the middle-aged man in green robes was entirely because he felt a strong sense of hostility from the 3 young men who followed the middle-aged man. Yu Haoran, the middle-aged man in green robes is actually hiding his strength. His real cultivation is that of a quasi-martial venerable who has passed the soul test. Thowling continued when he saw that Howard remembered the middle-aged man. A quasi-martial venerable who has passed the soul test? Howard asked in shock. That's right. Thowling nodded and confirmed. After receiving confirmation from Thowling, Howard frowned and thought for a moment before asking, Thowling, could it be that you discovered that the middle-aged man has already entered the Hungduan mountain range and is looking for the secret realm? That's right. Thowling nodded and continued to confirm. After receiving further confirmation from Thowling, Howard could not help but fall into deep thought. Although Gu Liangzi and Gu Quan were very famous, they were not enough to attract the attention of a quasi-martial venerable. In that case, the reason why the middle-aged man in green robes had suddenly appeared in Peach Blossom Town was somewhat suspicious. Now, combined with his sudden appearance in the Hungduan mountain range, it was definitely closely related to the secret realm hidden in the mountain range. Putting away his natal sword, Howard ignored the fire rock flowers that were 10 meters away and gestured to Thowling to point out the location of the middle-aged man in green robes. Then, he quickly followed him. Among the 36 peaks of the Hungduan mountain range, there was a peak that was shaped very much like a horse. Under Thowling's guidance, Howard quickly arrived at the foot of the peak, which was the location of the horsetail. Howard, wait a moment. Just as Howard withdrew his aura and was about to sneak into the peak, Thowling in his mind suddenly reminded him. Without asking too much, Howard knew that Thowling would explain the reason for the reminder. Howard, do you remember that among the people who were watching the battle, there were 2 people in white robes? One of them was a woman about 30 years old, and the other was a young girl about 18 or 19 years old. I remember. Howard nodded and replied. Regardless of whether it was the woman in her 30s or the young girl in her teens, they were all beautiful women with hot figures. As long as it was a normal man, it would be impossible for him not to notice them. Actually, the woman in her 30s is also a quasi-martial venerable who is hiding her strength. Her real cultivation has reached the complete mastery of the law, Thowling reminded him. Thowling, those 2 women also appeared in the Hungduan mountain range. Howard asked. That's right. As he nodded to confirm, Thowling continued. Actually, it was not only that woman. Among the people who were watching the battle, there were 3 quasi-martial venerables who were hiding their cultivation. At this moment, not only did they also appear in the Hungduan mountain range, but they have also entered the mountain peak in front of us. Thowling, it seems that the treasures hidden in the mystery land are far more valuable than the rumors I heard in my previous life. Howard speculated with a solemn expression. I feel the same way. Thowling nodded in agreement with Howard's speculation. Pagoda Spirit, did the 5 quasi-martial honored realm experts reveal themselves to each other? Howard asked as he lifted his head to look at the horse's head on the mountain peak. Just now, the middle-aged man in green and the woman in white have officially met. Thowling seemed to have guessed Howard's thoughts and explained. Did they have any conflicts with each other? Howard continued to ask. No, if that's the case, then let's go up the mountain openly. One had passed the soul calamity, while the other had completed the law. The difference in strength between the 2 was almost the same as a martial sage facing a martial royal. Since there was no conflict between the 2, it meant that either the woman in white had an extraordinary background, or the man in green was not the only one who knew about the mystery land in the Hungduan mountain range. However, no matter what the reason was, the method of sneaking into the mountain peak was meaningless. Therefore, Howard planned to directly face them and understand the mystery land in advance so that he would not be in the dark after entering the mystery land. Okay, among the 5 quasi-martial venerables who were hiding their strength, the one with the highest cultivation was only the middle-aged man in green. With the possession technique and the means of controlling Howard's body, it was not difficult to kill the middle-aged man in green. Therefore, Howard planned to face them directly. Thowling nodded in agreement. After tidying up his clothes, Howard flew up and went straight to the mountain peak. Huh. Just as Yu Haoran arrived at the mountain peak, a kind laugh suddenly sounded. Chapter 887. In the Hungduan mountain range. After the laughter, an old man in a light yellow robe, who was about 60 years old, greeted Yu Haoran, who had just flown to the top of the mountain. You are? Yu Haoran asked after landing on the ground while observing the environment at the top of the mountain. Master Yu, let me introduce myself first. Seeing that Yu Haoran did not recognize him, the yellow-robed old man introduced himself with a smile, not minding it at all. My surname is Zhang, and I'm from the Zhang family in Song City, Emperor Qin's kingdom. Are you from a Zhang family that followed the founding emperor of the great Qin dynasty to conquer the world? You have made outstanding military achievements and were finally granted the title of king with a different surname? After hearing the old man's introduction, Yu Haoran thought carefully and then asked in shock. That's right. Old man Zhang nodded with a smile. Junior Yu Haoran greets Senior Zhang. After getting confirmation from Old Man Zhang, Yu Haoran immediately greeted him respectfully. Originally, there were 6 aristocratic families in Xianyang City. There were the Meng family, the Li family, the Gao family, the Yin family, the Zhang family, and the Lu family. When Emperor Qin ascended the throne, the previous head of the Lu family, relying on his special relationship with Empress Dowager Zixuan, suppressed the Emperor Qin. As a result, after Emperor Qin took control of the great Qin dynasty, he immediately began to suppress and weaken the Lu family. In the end, the Lu family not only lost their status as an aristocratic family, but also was forced to leave Xianyang City and retreat to the fief of Feng City. The Zhang family was different from the Lu family. 70 years ago, when the previous Emperor Qin had just ascended the throne, some princes and princes who were unwilling to lose the throne joined forces to rebel. They led an army and almost attacked Xianyang City. At that time, the Zhang family was in charge of guarding Xianyang City. During that battle to defend the city, not only had the Zhang clan lost 2/3 of their clansmen, even their 3 ancestors who were at the quasi-martial exalt realm had died in battle under the siege of an enemy that was several times stronger than them. After the incident, the Zhang clan received a generous reward from the Emperor Qin, but they suffered a disastrous loss in power. Not only did they have to withdraw from the position of aristocratic family, but they also took the initiative to leave Xianyang City and return to their fief, Song City. After several tens of years of recuperation, the Zhang clan had already more or less recovered the strength of an aristocratic family. However, the battle to defend the city 70 years ago caused the Zhang clan to be unwilling to participate in the battle between the royal family. Other than a few young disciples who would enter the army to temper themselves, the experts of the martial saint realm and above would all choose to retire. This was also the main reason why Elder Zhang had addressed him as Grandmaster and not Prince Consort. The various secrets of the Zhang clan were revealed by Qin Tianzi during a long drunken conversation before he left Xianyang City. Qin Tianzi felt rather pitiful and helpless about the Zhang clan's deliberate alienation from the imperial family of the Qin state. This was because Song City, where the Zhang clan resided, was very close to the border stronghold that Qin Tianzi oversaw. Thus, Qin Tianzi understood the situation of the Zhang clan much better than ordinary people. Although the Zhang clan did not participate in the affairs of the Qin state's imperial family, their loyalty to the imperial family had not changed. If there came a day when the imperial family of the Qin state was in danger of being exterminated, the experts of the Zhang clan would still risk their lives to protect their master like they did 70 years ago. This was also one of the important reasons why Yu Haoran sincerely respected Elder Zhang. Grandmaster Yu is too polite. Being able to feel Yu Haoran's heartfelt respect just now, Old Man Zhang was very happy and courteous. After all, Yu Haoran's arrogant and domineering style was known by everyone in the Emperor Qin state. For Elder Zhang to respect Qin Tianzi so much, it also represented his affirmation of the Zhang clan's selfless sacrifice in the past. Senior Zhang, why have you come to the Hungduan mountain range? Turning his head to observe the situation of the mountain peak in front of him, Yuhaoran found that he was currently standing at the tip of the mountain's horse head's nose. On his left and right, there were two identical, bottomless caves, just like the two nostrils on the horse's face. Such a realistic structure made Yuhaoran secretly surprised. At the same time, he could not help but want to understand more from Elder Zhang. Grandmaster Yu, may I know the reason why you are here? Although the Zhang clan was loyal to the imperial family of the Emperor Qin, the Zhang clan had its own rules of conduct. He would not confide in Yuhaoran just because Yuhaoran was the emperor's son-in-law that the Emperor Qin valued the most. Of course, it's for the secret realm that is about to open. Yuhaoran replied without hiding anything. After all, the secret realm that he knew was just some rumors that he heard from some loose cultivators in Guangling City in his previous life, so there was nothing to hide. Grandmaster Yu, then you are here for the same reason as me. Elder Zhang said with a smile. Senior Zhang, how much do you know about the secret realm that is about to open? Hearing that Elder Zhang was also here for the secret realm that was about to open, Yuhaoran was secretly happy and quickly asked for advice. Actually, I don't know much about the secret realm that is about to open. I only know that. Ahem. Just as Elder Zhang was about to introduce some information about the secret realm, the middle-aged expert in green, standing in the cave on the left, coughed lightly. After hearing the middle-aged man's soft cough, Old Man Zhang's face revealed a trace of displeasure, but he chose to keep his mouth shut. What do you mean by this? They did not know each other, nor did they have any enmity with each other. The middle-aged expert in green's action of stopping Elder Zhang from introducing the secret realm made Yuhaoran very unhappy. At the same time, his tone of questioning was also quite rude. You, did anyone teach you how to respect your elders? In the face of Yuhaoran's rude questioning, the middle-aged expert in green did not say anything. However, a young man behind him immediately jumped out and shouted loudly. Get lost! Yuhaoran looked coldly at the young man. After reprimanding him harshly, he looked back at the middle-aged expert in green, waiting for him to give a reasonable explanation. You dare to insult me. Believe it or not, I'll chop you up alive. Yuhaoran scolded him, as if he was reprimanding an animal. The young man was completely enraged by the humiliation just now. After taking out his lightsaber, he threatened fiercely. You don't care. Ignoring the young man who took out his lightsaber, Yuhaoran looked directly at the middle-aged expert in green, his tone full of dissatisfaction. The middle-aged expert in green looked disdainfully at Yuhaoran and asked contemptuously, Do you dare? As long as you don't interfere, I dare. Yuhaoran retorted harshly. You can try. The middle-aged expert in green withdrew his hands that were originally behind his back and provoked him. In the face of the middle-aged expert's provocation, Yuhaoran's response was very simple. He directly took out his lightsaber and hooked his finger at the young man holding the lightsaber. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.